You're listening to the Zetitic Newscast on the Zetitic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
Welcome, everyone listening around the world, wherever you may be, wherever and whatever time it may be. This is your host, Dave, and Xavier Diamant of the Zetitic Newscast with episode 3. It's been a few weeks since our last episode, so certainly a lot has happened. We've made a few new publications tracking local and geopolitical events. We've also got a special guest here tonight to just ride shotgun with us and comment. We've got several different topics on the schedule. But Xavier, what do you think is foremost on your mind? You've written a new Epstein article, which of course we've seen a lot of developments, around in the last few weeks. But also, we in our last episode we really got into some of the issues with astrophysics, mainstream astrophysics, and I think even since that time there have been some revelations to come out on the internet. It seems like the momentum around questioning some of the things that we're taught in primary school and that sort of thing. People are more willing to question that than ever before. And the Epstein, situation ties right back into that as well, because here you have a, massively public expose of basically what everybody's been denying for so long, which is pedophile rings, high-level conspiracy, cover-ups, etc. And so that's just opening people's mind up to a degree that some people are losing their mind, right? But I think also, we wanted to talk about an article you had written weeks ago about the obvious multi-market catastrophe that seems to be looming.
Definitely.
Right? So where would you like to begin?
Well, I guess we could start from the top. I definitely think that the Finders case is pretty phenomenal. It's a 1987 case of these multiple individuals out of Tallahassee, Florida, who were caught by customs transporting all these seemingly abused children to a school for geniuses in Mexico. At least that was their defense. And there was just a lot of, case dismissed, hush, hush. We find out that some of the members are connected to the FBI and the counterintelligence, foreign division, and it's rather involved. Yet, hey, even Patch Adams will go to bat for them and say,
weren't there something like 500 different mothers who came forward to claim that they were the mother of these children? That there was like an initial group of flea-bitten children that were seen with these individuals, and as the cover-up ensued, it's like I wonder how intentional that was.
The whole alternative lifestyle element as well, it's fascinating if you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs after that whole case and like where some of these people ended up. That's extremely telling that these potential horrible trafficker of children, they could be any number of places. One of them is like writing for a futurist magazine. The other one is like tours, music festivals with a band.
These people are still walking around.
Right. Oh yeah. Real kind of cash like. And you just have to wonder, if these individuals happen to be connected with various members of the federal government and they're relatively small,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like basically a CIA farm that allows them to sort of quote unquote raise these kids in rustic animal husbandry and agrarian ways that are extremely dubious and almost ominous. Like, you just have to look at some of these details in the articles.
And this was recently
links.
declassified, but
Yeah,
we'll
just a couple
talk about declassification. I mean, that's sort
32
of
years has gone by. There's like some sort of ticking time bomb that is legislated into law where at some point it just becomes public record. And what a peculiar time to have this be declassified while this other massive case is being covered up at the present by all measure. And but despite the establishment's best effort, there's all of these residual questions, and the internet and the meme culture and everything is very much kind of keeping the issue at least not completely memory hold. So in that sense, there is a lot of benefit to that. I do think that like anything else, even memes can become this kind of psychographic form of pigeonholing thought about a particular issue or any number of deeper forms of investigation that can't be so easily wrapped into an image text combination, but it can shape the public mind around issues to where it can become just kind of another bread and circus in and of itself a little bit. So,
Right.
I think it's important to just stay with the looming inconsistencies and questions.
yeah.
The big one for me continues to be like, where is Ghislaine Maxwell? The daughter of Robert Maxwell, outed, known Mossad spy, worked with MI6 through England, as well as had all kinds of CIA connections. And she apparently is this incredibly kind of secret agent type individual. She knows how to fly helicopters and planes and ships and submarines.
Wow.
I mean, it's really fascinating. And she was a kind of general socialite for so long that, hey, what is she doing now?
Well,
There's
I
no
think,
investigation.
I
into
think
that.
for the casuals who are listening, the quote unquote uninitiated to this sort of information, the thing they got to really remember is and consider is how much MK Ultra has now formed society, and to what extent children have been trafficked, kidnapped, and basically industrialized and used for all this cloak and dagger, basically worldwide, black ops operations. It's kind of crazy to think about, because it is industrial at this level when you are involving all these heavily funded agencies that are, also equipped with high-tech military weaponry. It's really incredible, and this is just an extension of Epstein. Epstein is one cog in a huge set of wheels that people need to hashtag look into it, right?
Yeah, and really extend the investigation, because actually, by all measure, a lot of Epstein's operations were just starting to kick off right around this same time.
Yeah, that would explain all the heavy equipment and construction going on at his island, right?
Right.
And that's one guy. He's very wealthy, but he's not that wealthy compared to,
right. And we're not even really sure to the extent or origin or path by which he gained all this wealth. It seems to be that he was within an inner circle for so long that he was just sort of propped into a sophisticated role to a great extent.
Right.
And he became this super valuable multi oligarch agent that was able to just extract all sorts of leverage from the political, scientific, economic, academic spectrums.
Right.
Through these parties and these invites and these, super exclusive access debauchery, essentially, and depravity. And that becomes, just a mystical object of worship within the upper echelons.
So there
of
must be
society.
a lot of people in like FBI, CIA who are not firsthand involved in this, but know about it, right? And they probably Machiavellianly justify this whole thing by saying, well, if we don't, control these entities through the blackmail with our assets, such as Epstein, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then someone else will do that. Or, I don't know what kind of justification that they make for it, but
I mean, it definitely falls under realpolitik and, the Delphi method even. Because if you can manufacture a consensus within a political body that everyone knows that everyone else is blackmailed to,
right,
then you can create incredible gaslight narratives that can just be foisted on the populace because everyone is trying to get their ponies in a row,
right,
and say, look, we all know that we're compromised, so what's the best way to put up a shield
yeah,
to accountability? And that's
so like
wild.
you actually kind of initiated the first CNN post, right?
True.
And it was all about the Epstein saga, and you thought that was like probably the best starting point for us to sort of start to peel back the onion, so to speak. And then what happened after that, right? It was Neil deGrasse Tyson coming out talking about all of his bullshit astrophysics stuff, and then it was Greta Thunberg talking about climate change and that sort of thing, and that sort of took us off in this other direction. I did want to play the Trevor Noah clip with just the first part of it, because it really, I thought, like, after talking to you about her and what you said, like that this is essentially mass child abuse that people want more of, and just watching the interaction between Trevor Noah and her, and also just the bullshit that they're saying, like, it just blows my mind. But let me pull this up.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Daily Show.
Thank you so much.
And welcome to New York City. You came here on a zero emissions boat. And part of me thinks that's because you love the climate. The other part of me wonders if that's just your Viking heritage.
Maybe it is.
It might be.
Yeah.
Tell me why you did that. Why didn't you fly to New York City to come and speak at the UN and inspire people to move forward in the climate change movement?
I did it because I have, since a few years, stopped flying because of the enormous impact aviation has on the climate individually. And just to make a stand, and I am one of the very few people in the world who can actually do such a trip. So I thought, why not?
Wow. I mean, I know I wouldn't do that.
So where do you start with that? Zero emissions boat.
I'm the new Delphi. I'm the new Oracle at Delphi, basically. Listen, I am so privileged in center stage that I get to do this huge publicity stunt. Yay!
It's incredible, isn't it?
You're such a hero. You're such a climate savior. And you're a Viking, too. Yeah, you could be in Hollywood. Wait.
As a kid, and I wouldn't do it now. But what is inspiring is your determination. And what's inspiring is that it doesn't just affect other young people. It started to affect older generations in Sweden, in Germany. People are starting to call it the Greta effect, where people are taking more trains. Since you started this movement, they've said they feel ashamed to fly unnecessarily in Europe. Your mom is an opera singer, and she stopped flying, which means she couldn't perform the way she used to. Do you sometimes feel bad that she can't perform, or are you more excited that she's not part of, I guess, polluting the planet?
I don't care, honestly, about how she performs. She's doing musicals now, so I mean, she had to change career, but it wasn't that big.
And the planet is the most important thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, for all of us, I think it should be.
Why do you think...
So I'm not sure if I properly introduced our special guest, but we got Orthogonal. Orthogonal's a friend of the show, and he's riding shotgun with us. And he made a really good point to me after we were talking about this clip, and it's like this disassociation from like what's going on with Greta, right? She's got a form of autism. She's Asperger's. That's something that she's publicly like talking about. And here she is basically not having empathy for her mother or the situation she's put her in by her choices. And that's like a trait, is the lack of empathy in folks with that sort of mental affliction, right? And it's something being celebrated here and encouraged. You should be ashamed for riding a train and take it,
Just get a new job.
Just get a new job, right?
She has the understanding and misunderstanding of a 16-year-old autistic girl.
Right. And that's it's being used, it's being weaponized
and worshipped as a form of new idolatry, essentially. Like, there's a huge fan club around it. I mean, it's a cult almost around this girl.
Yeah, and it you posted the meme, which I thought was just brilliant, The Simpsons, where the Ned Flanders, who's embodying the Epstein elephant in the room, is coming to say hey to Homer, and the garage door is closing on him, and the garage door is essentially the climate change distraction. Right. Y'all don't look over here. Look over at Greta Thunberg and all of the antics and PR stunts.
Hey, Climate Strike Friday. That's the best way to instate a 4-day school week.
Right.
Hey, we need an extra day to guilt trip ourselves into civilized about the planet. The terraqueous orb, as we've touched on before.
Right. But she's not complaining about the UN's own child trafficking or the effect deindustrialization would have on the third world, etc.
Deindustrialization.
Right.
Devastating. I mean, it's nothing short of like democide. I mean, because it extends over so many different genotypes that it's no longer just genocide.
Yeah.
It's just straight up indiscriminate starvation, impoverishment, immiseration unto death. Awesome. That's
it's
real,
the vehicle of the eugenics agendas.
Definitely. And it's, as we showed before, it's part and parcel to just oligarchical psychology that throughout history this continues to recapitulate and reemerge. And this is not the first time they've tried to use notions of planetary carrying capacity to guilt trip their feudal colonies and vassal states into complying with whatever edict and set of rules they
Right.
drew up.
So when I talk to some folks about globe questioning, before we're able to address any of the evidence, one of the things they often say is, well, I just don't know why it would be in anyone's benefit to lie about the shape of the earth. And, most of the time, if I'm talking to somebody about this subject, I've already established with them that the authorities are liars. The people who hand these theories on from down high, they have a tendency to lie, and they have a tendency to want to control. And so them having a motive doesn't prove anything or disprove anything. It's really beside the point. But if we're talking about a motive, and we know with all the climate change hysteria, of course it's intimately tied with the idea of a terraqueous orb, to use your phraseology, because of this whole atmosphere gravity issue that holds all of the matter and the gases together in a pressurized system, right? Which is how the greenhouse gas idea comes about, But as far as a motive, if we're going to talk about that, climate change and all of that, it's all tied around us, the subject of resource scarcity as well, right? There's finite resources because we're on a terraqueous orb. Well, it would be in their benefit if we were not on a terraqueous orb, but rather on an infinite plane. It would be in their benefit to convince us otherwise that we're on a limited, these little islands with limited resources, and so there's not enough for everybody to go around, so we need some of what you produce to, take care of everybody, and it's just this parasitic, exterministic, ideology, and they are tied together.
Absolutely.
Right?
100%.
It's the death cult.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it's also resource control, it's mass psychology, mass mental illness as well.
That's right. Getting people to systematically deny their own experience in favor of an authority hearsay declaration. It's the ultimate form of dehumanization.
Right.
And the ultimate form of serfdom.
Yeah.
Because it's spiritual identity based servitude unto a speculative model, essentially.
Right. So not only do I personally believe that, the whole all the feeder groups and the industrialization of, child sex trafficking and so on, I think that part of that whole operation is creating a population of mind control slaves. It takes a lot of energy to really suppress your senses. And that's what's going on is they have to really think of all the technology they have to wage and the mass media they have to wage to get people to ignore their senses in this whole calculus. And so, when I look at the Epstein thing, and we keep going back and forth between these two subjects, but to me, you have a bunch of psychopaths, in control, and they really are just perverting and inverting reality. And so that kind of, I kind of would like to go next to this excellent investigative piece that you shared on the network by a YouTuber and BitTuber. I think he's on BitTube as well. Wakey. Am I pronouncing that right?
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yes.
You want to preface that?
So essentially, Wakey, in my opinion, is one of the more intelligent and nuanced thinkers on this subject. The way he presents evidence, the way he goes through a multitude of considerations and perspectives around this notion of experience-based science and what it has to do with the world system in the world conception that we kind of labor under on a day-to-day basis. He does a really good job of just kind of digesting the issue in a sensible, rational way. It's not really encumbered by a lot of the doctrinarian suppositions around the topic. So in that sense, I think he has a very fresh take, very clear take, He has a lot of great material besides this interview, but ultimately this interview is pretty breakthrough in the sense that he was able to use the credential worship of the establishment against the establishment by donning a kind of ambush journalism identity of a Oxford affiliated media personality.
Right.
And he uses that as a springboard to honestly ask and probe the issue to someone who is one of the top 10 really astrophysicist personalities in the mainstream. And he lays bare the utter parrotry, like it's just parroting and regurgitation of these catchphrases, these buzzwords, these umbrella concepts that contain the entire world conception.
And basically, he impersonates a journalist from Oxford that, like you're saying, he sort of plays the role of somebody she would want to interview with, right?
Exactly.
And so he gets the opportunity to be in front of her sort of under false pretenses, but he's then able, like you said, ambush journalism. Essentially ask her some pointed questions from this perspective,
right,
of a, you know, we hate to use the word here, Xanon, or the phrase flat earther. He's more of a globe questioner than anything. He's just questioning the things that they're claiming.
Exactly.
With a rational, you know, just it's sort of an innocent way to ask the question.
I think so too. It's totally zetetic. It's proceed by inquiry. It's transparent questions. It's kind of undeniable foundation for an interview. So in that sense, she doesn't already have all these preconceptions in her mind about what his position is. She just assumes that he's agreeing with her expertise.
Right.
And that's what's so beautiful throughout the interview is she begins to realize that this guy has a lot more in-depth critical scrutiny on the subject than she was ever comfortable to put up with.
Right.
And she basically ends the conversation by saying, "Oh, well, you don't have the credentials I thought you did." You know?
Right. As if that's proof.
As if that's proof or a disproof of anything.
Yeah.
And it's a total non sequitur, and it shows that actually anti-science, authoritarianism, and capriciousness at the heart and the hubris of these expert kind of neo-aristocratic priests of scientism that get at least, you know, in all the grants and NGOs and everything, probably hundreds of millions of dollars a day in the aggregate.
Right.
Science with a capital S.
And, you know, these are, to a great extent, individuals that are every bit a part of the same parasitic class that is associated with all these child traffickers. I mean, we saw Lawrence Krauss implicated in the whole Epstein ring.
Right.
We saw even someone like Steven Pinker.
What about
Prince Albert?
Oh well, yeah, the royalty, absolutely.
What's Stephen Hawking?
Stephen Hawking,
right?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
The
right
longest
there,
survivor of is it Lou Gehrig's disease that he has? What is that?
He 5x'd the record.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was more. Maybe it was 7x. Because the second place is a seventh of how long he lived with it. It's like 8 years or
He's
something.
He's probably in a jar somewhere.
56 somewhere. I think he went 56.
Can we
years.
Excuse me, ALS.
Yes. So he 6x'd the second placer and had telepathic speech technology in his throat. Interesting.
He likes strip clubs too.
And zero-G planes. When he went
was he riding those?
Yeah.
The vomit comets?
Excuse me,
That's right.
It is
That's
also
right.
known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
Correct. He's that's a whole separate massive proceed by inquiry topic, but in the sense of wakey wakey, I just think that he used a really good technique
So
for outing this expert class.
What are some of the major sort of topics that crumbled in your mind with this expose?
Okay. The one thing that really stood out for me was the gas law and her explanation for at what point something becomes pressurized atmosphere.
Right.
And when does it become 0G, suspended in space-time, vacuum environment?
Yeah.
What is the threshold?
The variable of volume was the biggest problem.
Huge.
What
issue.
is the volume of the container?
But the answer is always the same, and that's gravity.
Right.
And that's why
Right.
if you look at the conception of gravity, it is a metaphysical umbrella concept. It can be anything you want it to be, basically.
It's relative. And that's another one, right?
Right.
Relativity.
They even came out and admitted through Einstein that it was entirely unobservable. It couldn't be observed, but it was omnipresent and omnipotent for all items at all times throughout space and time. That is a God concept that's packaged. It's a God of the gaps packaged in a scientific umbrella concept. I mean, that's all gravity ultimately is. Because on paper it looks nice and sophisticated, but under any kind of experimental, isolated, independent variable type scrutiny, it's a pseudo force. It totally has no bearing on any actual objects.
And density and buoyancy explains a lot.
And it comes in, again, like a God of the gaps concept to fill in all of the problems that are associated with believing that there are people who live upside down from you who just cannot tell.
Yeah, I think that fundamentally we find that a lot of these explaining aways are desperate attempts to, I guess, keep buoyant the theory of heliocentrism, or, the heliocentric model, which is really what this discussion is about. I think that, flat Earth and even globe questionings, for that matter, are mundane, and this is really a discussion of the geocentric and heliocentric models.
Yeah.
And epistemological standards, like how we come to know that what we think we know is actual knowledge. In that sense, that's pretty key when it comes to science, because unless you've got a uniform criteria across all fields by which repeatability, testability, and demonstrability is consistent, you don't really have much of a framework for repeatable, demonstrable
Well, it's
science.
like if I go out tonight in a clear sky and I take a time-lapse photograph video of the stars moving above, but then a mathematician, astrophysicist points at a chalkboard and tells me to ignore what I'm observing, how is that science? He's saying that for this reason on the chalkboard, you're actually perceiving what you think you perceive is actually you spinning. It's for this reason, not for the reason of what you see. Because if you go out and what you see, it appears that we're fixed and that these things are moving predictably around us.
Yeah.
So predictably, in fact, that I can actually navigate the entire plane of existence with them as a reference point.
Right.
And over hundreds of years, thousands of years,
Every
that's
civilization,
like unbelievable.
with no perceivable
Mayans-
parallax.
No
parallax.
And the Mayans still have eclipse readings that are accurate from when they calculated them 3,500 years ago.
Right.
More.
I know.
So, it's all about gaslighting your sense of size. In the same way that evolutionism is there to gaslight your sense of time.
Yeah.
These are Masonic mind control tricks, basically.
It's the ideological pretext for eugenics and fascism,
Right.
communism.
It really is. It
Absolutely
really is.
Any kind of authoritarian idea of social preservation.
And it goes back to atomism. Atomism is completely bound up within it as well. And the idea of the monad and all of this particularist kind of reductionistic framework that has been ensconced thoroughly in almost every single branch of science as a philosophical set of assumptions at bottom of principles.
Well, on that note, you talk about atomism, right? And when you're in chemistry and physics class, it's a bunch of spheres at the end of the day with a bunch of space in between it, rotating in orbit around each other, right? That's what they tell you. Mm-hmm. And it was really, you just saying that made me think of this clip, because here's Neil again talking about the absurdity of flat Earth, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. But he talks about the tendency of the universe to create things in a sphere. I find it really interesting, so I'm going to play that real quick.
So tell me, Neil, is the Earth flat?
We have video from space of the rotating spherical Earth. The Earth is round.
Thank you for joining us on this episode.
What's odd is there are people who think Earth is flat,
Right.
but recognize that the moon is round. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the sun are all spheres, but Earth is flat. That's not, something doesn't square.
Something doesn't jive, right?
Okay. Plus, in my latest book, ooh, did I just plug my book?
Wait, your latest book is called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. What? We just happen to have a copy right here.
No, it just happens to be. I swear we didn't plant the book. I have an entire chapter titled On Being Round. And it's an exploration of how all the laws of physics and the accounting of energy as processes unfold in the universe, how that conspire to make things round.
So it favors the sphere.
Favors a sphere, yes.
Conspiratorial privilege designed into the universe.
Is that like a conspiracy?
Conspiracy.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Damn.
That's a conspiracy.
I like that. That's a conspiracy.
Because look at us, right, Neil? We're so spherical, human beings and everything in nature, so spherical.
So
you see them
spherical.
so much all the time.
Really, actually, inorganic asymmetry, or inorganic symmetry for that matter, is actually extremely rare compared to organic asymmetry. Organic asymmetry is so much more common.
The oblate spheroid.
Oh yeah, that's the thing.
Oh, he goes on to say.
Yeah, he goes on to say, because he recognizes
Yeah.
that inorganic symmetry is not common in nature. So that's why he's got to say that the Earth is actually an oblate spheroid, because organic asymmetry is what constitutes most natural forms.
But why is it asymmetrical? Because it's spinning.
And if something's not a sphere, it's a little bit flattened, you can ask what flattened it, and you find out, oh, it's rotating real fast.
Right.
So then it gets a little flattened because of that.
Like a pizza. Like a pizza.
Like a pizza. Like the
when I got the
gravitron at the
pizza.
fair.
Yeah.
The centrifugal force.
merry-go-round.
So if it's been spinning for so long, Neil, and that makes it flat, how come it's not flat? Because it's spun flat. That, of course,
Of course,
I don't believe that, right? Like,
But the whole straw man that he demolishes
right.
is it's just so obviously not.
I just can't help
the
but
point.
think of the Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze scene of Ghost and the pottery wheel, and
Right.
they're just spinning it around, and
Yes. So you would think that there would be noticeable areas where you'd feel centripetal versus centrifugal force,
Sure.
but there is no such differential.
Nobody
anywhere.
feels anything different.
Nothing.
In fact,
Zero.
nobody can
It's
really
unmeasurable.
report feeling any spin at all.
Ever, nowhere.
Well, this is the
at all, at any time. Look at rock formations.
the-
You know those statues? They've got one that's like 45 feet tall. That's just stacked rocks.
Right.
Are you telling me that the gravity is now a string? It's now a rope that binds all those rocks at an angle off camber from the
Magic.
it's voodoo.
this is the Morley experiments. You know, the
Michelson-Morley.
the Michelson-Morley experiment.
And they rewrite it in favor of Einstein.
They do.
They say, "Oh, they just discovered that there wasn't an ether."
Exactly.
That is
exactly.
just the most twisted bullshit
It
interpretation.
didn't
you can
exactly
possibly
prove
imagine.
the existence of the ether, but it also in no way proved that we're on a spinning
Terraqueous
ball.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the other fallacy, presented by Neil in that little clip is that, some people believe that the Earth is flat. He purports to know what those people believe. He doesn't. Secondarily, he says those people agree that all these other objects in the sky are spheres.
Straw man.
Straw man. No, they don't.
No, they
However, we could talk about what we see. And I thought this was interesting. This came through a nearby city
Yes.
to the CNN headquarters. It's a touring art display produced by UK artist Luke Jerram, who has some very weird associations to basically the UN and the space agencies and various astrophysics, mainstream astrophysics communities. And basically, he has these exhibits where it's this big ball with a projector on the inside projecting quote unquote NASA photography scans of the moon, and they hang it up in various places. I think that's in Duke Chapel.
Oh my god!
Right?
Wow.
And I've seen some pictures.
In your face.
And check it out, Xavier. There was at the one in Durham, when they came to Durham, there was the Moloch, the owl.
You're kidding.
It wasn't whether
Wow.
the owl is being worshipped as Moloch, right? And Bohemian Grove is like up for debate, but there was an owl, a big owl, and then this moon sitting there, and some people would be just like, oh well, it's nighttime and they're nocturnal and blah blah blah. But there's some weird.
It's obvious occult symbology.
Right.
So are cats. Like why did you pick an owl?
Exactly.
And you're in the Bull City.
Yeah.
You already have a bull statue right next to it.
You're right, but it it begs the question too, like this is pretty photorealistic, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty cool.
it is pretty cool, like it's cool technology, right? But if this can be faked, right? Like if it can look this real, and that's in Duke Chapel, right? Like why?
I guess might as well be,
Well, and it just goes to show. Okay, so they really do know what the dark side of the moon looks like. Is that what they're saying?
Well, I don't know what's on the
I thought that the moon was fixed.
Well, I think in
at
these
one-
exhibits, I don't know if you can go to the other side.
Huh.
I didn't go, so I don't know.
but it's a sphere.
Oh.
He has another one with the Earth. You'll love that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah, apparently there's a lot of ice accumulating
There you
on
go.
the bottom
Whoops.
of the world. So that is an implied antipody that has no...
Well, this is...
I mean,
It's actually inaccurate
of
because it's not an oblate spheroid. It should look like more like a pear, right?
Right.
Because Neil deGrasse Tyson said so.
Organic asymmetry.
Okay, I don't know why it's...
I don't know. Looks like fun.
It's fun.
Anyways, So the last bit of space news since our last episode, I thought this was just gold. And this kind of reconfirms one of your going theories, Xavier, that they've moved the goalposts from the fake alien invasion idea to something more sellable, such as an asteroid strike.
Yep.
Because they could use very conventional weaponry and make it not look like Independence Day and put on the big light show that might get exposed with the ubiquity of cell phones and so on. Mm-hmm. Maybe asteroid strike would be easier to fake, but also definitely. You see just this massive push for further militarization, weaponization, tax, collection. Who knows where the money's going? Space Force, protection measures. We got to build a shield around the world. Reminds me of a panopticon.
And this sort of adoption of a dome, a sort of encasement.
The firmament.
Right, a firmament. But made
but
by
one constructed by the U.S. government.
Right. Right. And again, it's all the occult inversion of reality, and they just love to just rub it in people's faces and pretend like they'll never find out.
Let's play this. See what they say.
This community lately has been finding more than 2,000 near-Earth asteroids each year.
This is just a recent development because of the great new software, new detection algorithms, new sensors that we have. We really proved our ability to discover these things. The era of really high-speed computers, great CCDs, these electro-optical sensors. We're really just starting to hit our stride, I think, with the technology. So we're constantly improving the systems. So that's the reason for our increase in discovery rates. But we really need to do a lot more. We need more hands on deck, I think. We really need a number of efforts across the planet.
Part of Greg's urgency comes from a congressional mandate directing NASA to find most of the asteroids that are 140 meters in size or greater by the year 2020. Observers helping NASA work toward that goal take note of everything they can find. But as Richard said earlier, the smaller asteroids can only be seen when they get close to Earth. And the
So we got another Aerosmith asteroid type situation on our hands.
Let's let it rip.
I know, right?
Let's let it rip.
That's a good song.
You know, I think that was their only number one single.
Really?
Yeah, you know, despite their several hits.
Right.
Was for Armageddon.
Well, I'm sure, you know, the Illuminati music industry just pushed it right to the top, you know, to promote the idea of an asteroid hit that, you know, we need to surrender our tax money to protect ourselves against and
reinforce the idea that astronauts are planetary saviors.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, they're
the ones who really advance our species.
Our best and brightest.
Best and brightest. Yeah.
They find their daughters attractive, just like Steven Tyler as well.
So. Oh my God.
And Trump.
They
Okay, so let's move on from the space news. I did want to highlight, I think it's pretty relevant for this episode because we did just have this Supreme Court decision ruling, quote, against the Second Amendment pertaining to the whole Sandy Hook fiasco, which was amazing. My take on this is if you can sue the manufacturer for someone else using it to commit a crime.
What kind of precedence is this?
I mean, as far as commerce is concerned, everything is now, the litigiousness of our society has now gone from a 10, which everybody knows the United States is one of the most litigious societies in the world. Despite our wealth and prominence, you know, it is we're taxed half to death, and the regulations are out of control. And this is just going to make it worse. And it also, I mean,
It's a stigmatization protocol as well. It's basically saying, oh, well, we're more enlightened today than those old racist white guys back then.
Right.
We know that technology is going to get the better of everyone because we're controlling it.
Yeah, the irony being
it's
that
the
most,
technocrat position.
Most firearm laws were typically very Jim Crow, initially, and here we are talking about it now.
Yeah, but we're all serfs now.
Yeah,
it's the neo-feudalist system. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's basically a form of prima nocta. It's a form of coming in and saying, we get the best dibs because we extract tax from your labor, buy all the best weapons for ourselves, and then censor your ability to get even rudimentary weapons.
Right. And what about these are the same activist law firms that are suing Alex Jones over the Sandy Hook stuff.
Yeah.
Using the parents who who may not even know any better, right? They might just be in trauma and I maybe preyed upon by these activist law firms, but at any rate, they're also talking about the culpability of the video game makers who use Remington arms in the video games, as if like they can prove that the video game inspired this guy to do the thing, which that's a whole nother can of worms together, whether that guy did the thing.
Oh, yeah, like vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies, they're exempt from third-party accountability.
Mm-hmm. There's a special court for that.
There's a special court for that. So why is that? Are they a privileged class?
Look, if you can argue to this level that somebody is culpable for a behavior, you can argue anything.
The slippery slope is literally infinite cliff.
So on that note, this is before the Supreme Court ruling. This happened in another local, quote, jurisdiction to the CNN headquarters in Orange County, North Carolina. And it happened before the Supreme Court ruling, which kind of tells me maybe this was all sort of contrived to begin with. I mean, we know they've been after the guns, for as long as we've had the right to hold them, right? Our rights to hold them and wield them have been incrementally, sort of whittled away over time. But this was a work session in the local jurisdiction where ostensibly the city or the county commissioners had heard a complaint about from some residents that they heard some gunfire near their their residence, right? And they were actually new construction, as it turns out, encroaching on rural communities who have land that they can shoot their guns on safely, frankly. And nobody was hurt, nobody was killed with crossfire or anything like that. They heard gunfire and were concerned, and then they subsequently, somebody reported that they found a bullet casing or a bullet potentially in their gutter, right? So this was the ostensible reason that the county commissioners then heard from their lawyer about the feasibility of passing a gun noise regulation. And I went and listened to it. Of course, it's just replete with Delphi method bullshit. They're actively organizing essentially to encroach, and they're making moves, and they're trying to get their troops behind them. That's how I see it. And what was really compelling to me in the whole testimony was one of their troop leaders, the sheriff, comes in and explains the difficulty of enforcing such a regulation. And I thought this was really telling.
So I'd like to hear more about why it's so hard to enforce again, or whether it's the noise ordinance or this, and maybe again if the sheriff wants to weigh in, right? So, I mean, why can in the First Amendment you can have time, place, and manner restrictions, right? So if someone is shooting, in the middle of the night or at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning, and, why can't we have restrictions on that, and why can't we enforce them if we have them?
So this whole topic has got to be carved into about 4 different sections: noise, safety, hunting, and those other regulated matters. The problem with noise, Commissioner Dorson, is that it occurs and it's over instantaneously. If it's prolonged, that gives us an idea of where we're going. As far as why it's problematic for us to enforce, we are finding ourselves wandering onto people's property with no lawful authority to ask them if they're conducting a lawful, some lawful practice. If they
The only answer, of course, is to make this practice unlawful. But they can't do that locally.
Right. And what this whole kind of cosmopolitan attitude that the commissioner brings forward is, listen, my sensibilities have to be privileged over your rights.
You can tell by
have to be
his
privileged.
pair of glasses,
Right.
on his head.
And where he wears them.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Domesticated, effete fear
about to send Markel his
trumps
way.
competent rural marksmanship.
Yeah, if you
Exercise of shooting.
if you know what you're doing, there isn't a risk to begin with.
If you have a licensure, we'll license you.
Oh well, that's the thing. The slippery slope has already been so far instated for decades now with the licensing.
You can get
that,
a permit.
You have to ask permission to exercise an innate ability. It's
Not
like,
just with firing a gun. Well,
Oh,
what did they take first? The right to drive, to travel, really,
Right.
to travel,
And
and
that's tied
then
with the
that's the
cartographic
justification.
Yep.
Well, if you need a license to travel, how can you argue you don't need a license to own a gun?
Yeah, that's the
And I'm like,
precedent
well, I'm
setting.
arguing
Yep.
both.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, they have no intrinsic authority over those matters.
Where's the
They have to-
jurisdiction?
Right. Where's the jurisdiction? It's imposed artificially through slight majority opinion, purportedly. Wow, that's such an amazing foundation.
So
for your
no, but that
authority.
guy represents you.
Yeah, he's the sheriff, and the key word he uses is property. He's on.
But I think he has a very different perspective of that property than the commissioner. The
Oh, of
commissioner
course.
is sitting up on his throne like,
on
this is my dominion. The sheriff is like, dude, it ain't that simple. Like, you have to actually... Good luck convincing the person with the gun on their property that that's yours. Because that's what you're saying, that you can come on their property and tell them what to do.
Right. Or that the person reporting it is doing it out of pure, honest intent to
Oh, of
just
course.
make it stop. And that's bullshit, because that's snitch society. You're setting up a precedent where anyone can just say, "Oh, I heard guns," and then all of a sudden that person is,
Accosted by a bunch of people
Yeah.
with guns?
Right.
Because you're so anti-gun. You want someone else with guns to go accost
And
somebody with
harass
guns.
someone else who's not under badge with guns. Like, wow. Can you spell hypocrite?
Yeah, not to mention that the law enforcement individuals are victims of this themselves. That they are the ones that have to go out there and literally put themselves in the line of fire and put themselves in a very precarious position where they're seemingly arguing with an armed individual on their domain.
This guy's looking out for his guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
seriously.
he's like, it's like, this is a lot of work for no return and
Zero return.
I
Purely
mean,
political posturing.
yeah. I think he detects that. Let me finish this clip out.
They are firing a gun in a lawful manner. Now you have an officer with a person on their property with a firearm conducting lawful exercise. And if there's an argument, the officer is now in a perilous point, and somebody's going to get hurt. There are instances when we respond to residences and we encounter folks who are firing in a safe manner, and we have a very good, cordial conversation, and that's generally the case. But when we're placed in a position of having to wander about and look for where this sound occurred, it just creates an opportunity for a problem to occur. We have, and Mr. Roberts and I have talked over the years, even back to when Sheriff Pendergrass had asked for him assistance, about how we could discuss the noise issue. And what we have found, it is very difficult across the state. We've called other counties and across the nation, rather, about how they enforce noise with respect to firearms. It's very difficult to enforce. With respect to the safety, we've taken measures to go down that road. And, we had the firearms committee, and we dealt with that. And I think we dealt with it in a very appropriate manner. With respect to the gun ranges, there are no commercial gun ranges that I'm aware of that are outside. Those gun ranges that are in the county have proven to be safe because there have been very little or no instances of anyone becoming hurt at these ranges. That doesn't mean it cannot occur. We understand that. I talked with the former Durham County Sheriff who operated under this ordinance when it first came about, when the commissioners wrestled with this division of distance, and they landed on 600 feet. 900 feet was what they had talked about, and there were a lot of reasons why they chose the 600-foot line that they would need to speak to, not to me. The problem with that is when you talk about safety, that's cut and dry. You know whether it's safe or not. This was done in an effort to reduce the noise created by these ranges or these areas where folks were shooting. The problem that the sheriffs have told me that they've dealt with is that here is okay. And there's the line, here is not. How do you explain that to the neighbor that lives here?
I think we can end on that. I mean, he just completely demolished like the whole little scheme they had.
Vitamin duh. It's a pretty simple answer to your question.
It's unfortunate it takes a common sense guy who's physically having to go out and do that
a lot
to
of
explain
gesticulation
that.
Here,
Right. But that is the problem with contemporary America, is that it has adopted a kind of quasi-Stalinist, you show me the man, I'll show you the crime. If someone says that someone's doing something wrong, we have to enforce that like it's, the golden rule.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the city councils are just occupied by, ideologues of whatever UN documents or non-binding agreements they sign up for, and
yeah, I mean, they're so low level. The city
really
council
are.
people, they are products of universities, and they get into these positions voted in by other people, products of university and
the humanities.
Yeah, exactly. And they are just catering to the special interests that run that show, and they those people don't show up to the meetings. You know what I mean? Like they these people are useful idiots, especially at the Orange Water and Sewer Authority level. Your water management departments, your lower level. I mean, those people are just the worst.
Well, right, because they're put in a position to just stonewall any inquiry.
Right.
That's their job. Is that's not appropriate. I'm gonna call the police on you.
And there are some legitimate complaints waged at police departments and how they are structured, right? Like that you have to complain to an internal review board that works for the police department. Self-reporting.
That sounds objective.
Very objective, right? It's ridiculous. So anyways,
absolutely.
I think our Second Amendment rights are always under threat.
They've been under fire for 100 years.
So let's get into the biggest topic, probably, is the multi-market meltdown, right? This is another ongoing thing, really. I think I said in one of the previous episodes, economics is one of the things that really woke me up. Everybody listening to something like CNN, anyways, probably has a similar story. And I know, Xavier, you track this very closely, very active and early in the crypto markets and that development. So actually, let's pull up your article from weeks ago.
Yeah,
positing
just about a month.
Yeah, it was a month ago. Postulating a market reset.
Yeah.
Multi-market catastrophe looming large as a financial reset on the horizon. Now, let me give you my broad spectrum calculus of this idea of a financial reset, because I think it was around 2011, 2012, I started to encounter information concerning the idea of a financial reset or even a global debt jubilee. I don't think that's what you're talking about when you talk about a financial reset. You're talking more about an all-out collapse of securities, stocks, the paper markets, the electronic markets, etc. But in a sense, isn't that a debt jubilee?
Well, I think that's definitely how they would like to brand it and label it.
Who's they in your
I would say the governing boards of all the central banks combined, also including the Bank of International Settlements, IMF, World Bank organizations. All of these, I would basically call them propped up controllers.
Mm-hmm.
They're essentially fulfilling a function that's not fundamentally different than, say, like the director of the CIA. They're basically spokespeople for organized cabals that share certain underlying interests in farming human populations, basically, and consolidating resources in the thousandth decibel place population. I mean, we're talking, 10,000 people tops worldwide. And
right.
I don't even know how accurate current population counts are or any of those numbers. I kind of have lost trust in a lot of government record keeping, just from a historical research vantage point, that I don't think we really have a good take on how many people actually exist. And I think
existed for that matter.
And in that sense, you're still having to consider just vast populations that could just be totally unaccounted for all we know.
Right. But as far as a financial reset, do you see that as an inevitable result of a system gone awry, out of control, that will have catastrophically destructive consequences and will send us into the Stone Age? Or do you see it as a orchestrated event for some other dubious purpose? Or what? Because I think there are multiple probability alternatives for a financial reset, right. And some of them could be positive, and some of them might be actually organized intentionally.
And I think this is one huge aspect of what I believe is the equivalent of like a 30 years war, but worldwide. So World War III, in my opinion, started on September 11th. I believe we're in the 18th year of World War III. And then we're basically in a period of a 30 years war, where the next 12 years is going to be this massive expose, and in the literal etymological sense of the word apocalypse, a lifting of the veil of everything that's gone on and all the auspices that have been used to justify what's been going on as fraudulent across the board.
So I'm not going to disagree at all that we have a high level financial war taking place between world powers unreported in the mainstream press.
Yeah.
When you say the war started on 9/11, I couldn't agree with you more, but the history books have not yet really been written in stone as far as who the major, the deep state players were in that whole calculus. But there is some reporting that I'm not sure, many people are aware of. Most financial analysts don't really talk about this, but actually it was Ben Fulford who made me aware of this 57,000 tons of gold to Indonesia that was basically signed off on by JFK before he got shot. It was in the Geneva, Switzerland Hilton Hotel, so it's called the Green Hilton Memorial Agreement, and basically this goes back to what I have subsequently learned were large quantities of gold lent from dynastic Asian families to the families that set up the Federal Reserve, ostensibly to industrialize the world with the gold. For some reason, I guess it was our innovation and our system of government, these ancient families, these dynastic families wanted, think of China, thousands of years of silk and spices trading. These motherfuckers were accumulating large quantities of gold. And if we don't know how many people exist, Xavier, how do we know how many tons of gold exist?
Right.
So this quantity is, I think, way more than what's even publicly stated, right? And this agreement was you can read about it. We'll post the links after we post the episode. But according to Ben Fulford, some of these debts that were signed on to came due 9/11.
Right.
And then you have this mass event, and there's movements of money, there's insider trading, and all of this stuff.
Huge.
And actually,
missing Pentagon money. Or
you have the Donald Rumsfeld
Pentagon Fund.
2 trill on September 10th.
2 trill.
A chill 2 trill.
And you can look no further than somebody, an employee, Jim Rickards, that there was something hugely significant financial that happened that day, multifaceted. There are reports of what happened to the money in the vaults of those World Trade Centers, right? Who has benefited from the psychological operation of 9/11 financially? I think nobody can argue that the can has been kicked down the road as far as the world reserve currency system, the fiat money system, and all that. It should have collapsed
A long time ago.
Probably 2008, right? At a minimum, probably before that, but anyways, 9/11 definitely is a big part of that. And I just want to play this clip. I think
if you put your money in the bank, it's not your money anymore. It's the bank's money, and they'll give it to you if they feel like it.
We're in the last days of this country surviving.
We are still in the aftermath of 2008.
This could be the most serious recession in decades.
There was no time to be mad. We were looking at hours, maybe even minutes away from the sequential closure of every stock and bond market in the world. Nothing was solved. All that happened was the debt was lifted from private hands to government hands.
Down by 9%, the Paris market down by 9%.
If things change, they change for the worse. In 2008, the central banks bailed out Wall Street. In the next crisis, who's going to bail out the central banks?
Our economy is the envy of the world.
Trump's odds of winning re-election are the inverse probability of a recession between now and the summer of 2020. There may be a collapse, and I'm forecasting that. Something will emerge, and you could actually be one of the thought leaders. You could be one of the people who lead the way out of the wreckage. You can help us avoid it or help us emerge from the chaos.
So Jim Rickards worked for the CIA, the State Department. He was brought in after 9/11 to help them develop financial modeling software that predicted the future. Econometrics. And it was, again, ostensibly to predict movements of money, money laundering, and anti-terrorism. But his models are so good that they are able to actually control markets that way through his modeling software. And he's forecasting a collapse. He's a big gold guy, right? I haven't actually gone up on his crypto feelings, but I think he sees that as just another signpost that his forecast of a major reset, a financial reset, to use your phraseology, is coming.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing is, by reset, I basically mean a fundamental abandonment of the prior consensus in what constitutes a world reserve currency, a sense of unipolar economic order, multipolar economic order. I mean, the whole BRICS bank situation is huge. I mean, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. I mean, you're looking at a huge shift that could take place out of the formerly controlled Anglo-American establishment, essentially.
Do you see it as a sudden catastrophic event, or is it actually happening now gradually with the slow but steady investment in cryptocurrency as an alternative to, because one of the investigative reporters that I want to share with you tonight on this episode, his name is Bix Weir. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, I know some of his
he
material.
is postulating that yes, we're in a rigged market. Yes, we're headed towards a collapse. Yes, it's going to be a financial reset, but we actually have white hats that are, independently working to ensure that the system, while there will be chaos, there will be some level of destruction and things like that. It will actually be a net positive, because we're going to transition from a debt-based economy to a value-based economy through the social, psychological decision of moving away from these government fiat, edicts of this is what value is, and you will use this or we'll put you in jail. And he goes into much more detail about that on his website. I want to play a clip for you. It's called the Road to Ruta Theory. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I've seen some of the initial material, and it is interesting. I like the general hypothesis of, de-dollarization, essentially, revaluation as a basis for a new way of kind of, you could see it being compatible with cryptocurrencies for sure, because it's all about tokenization and allocation through digital accepted means of valuing assets.
One of the crazier things about Bix Weir's Road to Ruta Theory, there's a couple really stand out, facts, right? Well, not facts, but this is up for debate, right? One of them is he postulates that the Federal Reserve was implemented after the powers that be discovered vast riches in the Grand Canyon that sort of invalidate the idea of gold scarcity. So whereas gold as a form of bank collateral, as a form of savings, because of its, now gold still has a ton of uses that we still want it, we still want to use it, but maybe it won't be money. we came to that decision based on an understanding of how much there was to have.
Ben Bernanke came to that decision too.
Yeah, all the central banks did.
Gold money either. They just hold it.
Right.
For tradition.
Like when Ron Paul was questioning Ben Bernanke on the Hill, yeah. Why do you hold gold, the central banks? Just tradition.
Why don't you hold diamonds?
Yeah, he didn't want to agree that gold was considered money, but he did admit that they hold large quantities of it, and the reason stated was it's tradition, which is just malarkey. But
it's certainly malarkey.
Anyways, Bix produced this New York Times article about this discovery, and in it they discuss, a lot of money was spent sending equipment to the Grand Canyon to investigate this. It's been cordoned off. You can't explore it. It's basically an Antarctica type military.
Yeah, I mean, they put a fucking steamboat in the Colorado River in 1912.
Right.
Why? Exactly. I mean, there had to have been a huge motivating factor, but nevertheless, it was an enormous undertaking.
Right, an enormous, expensive undertaking that that somebody wanted a return for.
Yeah, I mean, there was no infrastructure to get to the Colorado River or roads or highway system. You know, it was someone had to finance this, and it's very documented. Lease Ferry and the entire expedition. Here we are looking at it now in the New York Times.
So what would happen, right? Okay, it's just funny to break down. Like, I can go to the bank today, and I can walk up to an ATM machine, which is what my bank is now. There's not even a teller. There's not a vault. Like, I can go to their location. There's not a vault with a bunch of cash in there, right? I can go in there and I can say to the ATM, which is just a Skype call with a teller.
Yeah, they're the middleman. They go to the ATM more or less for you.
So I go to the ATM and I say, I want my life savings out.
Right.
There's a pretty good chance that location is not going to be able to satisfy that request.
Right.
That's me, one guy.
Right.
If 5 others in this city do the same thing, we have a de facto default, in my opinion.
Right.
Right. That's me still believing that if I were able to get the papers out, I could use them to exchange for something else.
Right.
But most people don't even care about those papers. They care about the ones and zeros. But what if that doesn't amount to anything either? Then what do you go to? Gold or silver or cigarettes or alcohol or whatever you can trade. Gold is what central banks have determined money. There's something human about it, right? Like
its incorruptibility factor has a kind of mystical source of fascination, but culturally for thousands of years. So I mean,
correct.
That.
But if it was all of a sudden not scarce because there were millions of tons in the Grand Canyon, plus 57,000 tons in Indonesia, plus untold in Vatican, et cetera, and it was accessible.
Right.
What would that do to the whole financial system? Socially,
I mean, you would encounter incredible volatility because ultimately there'd be no underlying consensus as to what the.
But that would be a short-term
volatility,
and then people would eventually settle on, and it would be it would vary wildly by local areas for a while until we all came to a new agreement. Now, how does that happen with the introduction of crypto? Isn't that the wild card in the whole thing? Before it was based on commodities. Now we have all this electronic infrastructure and so on. And so Bix is basically postulating that there are white hats who are involved in a transition from the corrupt system to the new system, knowing this information. And this is the whole road to root theory, that and it's weird to even consider that the Federal Reserve infrastructurally would go out of their way to basically collapse their own system into a new one that is actually sort of an old one. So let me just play his summary of the road to Ruta theory, and I want to get your take on it.
Yes.
Road to Ruta theory postulates that there is a group of people in the United States as well as around the world that are working to remove and destroy the financial banking powers that have secretly controlled all aspects of our lives for hundreds of years. The original idea of this group sprang from the mind of Alan Greenspan and involved rigging markets with computer programs that he had invented in the 1960s. The process continues to this day. So why did the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston post a comic book on their website on January 1st, 2007 with two large red exclamation points after them? First of all, January 1st, 2007 is a holiday. I was at their website on December 31st, 2006. For some reason, this very site the next day posted these comic books with huge red exclamation points on them. That's exactly what it looks like. Since then, they have removed the red exclamation points, but the page is still there with the Wishes and Rainbows comic and the Road to Ruta, which is the teacher's guide to the Wishes and Rainbows comic. They are still on the Fed Boston website. The website address is right there at the bottom of this page. Now, the original idea of this comic book came from a short story that was written in the Fed Boston monthly newsletter that was published in September of 1980, which was a short story called Wishes and Rainbows. I actually got this copy of the original short story from the Fed Boston a few years back. Later on, I asked again because I had lost it, and they said they didn't know what I was talking about and couldn't find it. So I might actually have the last copy of the original short story. So after the short story was published in 1980, the Fed turned it into a comic book. And in 1981, they released the comic for Witches and Rainbows. Now, this comic is extremely difficult to find, so all you comic book collectors out there should be on the hunt for this original 1981 Wishes and Rainbows comic. The 2007 version, there's a lot of them out there, although they are out of print. The Fed does not print these anymore. They just have a PDF download you can get on that website. So those are the two different versions of this Wishes and Rainbow comic. Obviously, it's very important to the Fed for it to publish this in the first place and then come out in 2007 to publish it. I might note that in 1981, we were talking about going back onto a gold standard, and Reagan had set up the Gold Commission to study the meaning of going back to a gold standard. And in 2007, we're on the brink of the financial collapse. So really interesting times that these comics were released, and I'll get more into that in a second. This is the inside cover of both the versions, and they pretty much say the same thing. It was written by a woman named Deborah Carpenter Beck. I don't know much about her, and there's not much to find on her on the internet, at least. But the other guy, the guy who adapted it into a comic book, is a guy named Stephen DeVoe, and I found out quite a bit about him, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. So I'm going to go through a summary of Wishes and Rainbows. It's a very odd comic. It's very cryptic with a lot of hidden meaning. But I'll just run through quickly a summary of what this comic is saying. Wishes and Rainbows is a story of a little girl named Ruta who lives in a world of no color and is told by her grandmother stories of a wonderful place with colored flowers called Colorland. The grandmother warns Ruta that the people who live in Colorland are very big and can step on the small people of Pebbleton. Ruta says that she's not afraid of the big people of Colorland and will bring some colors back to her grandmother and the people of Pebbleton. Ruta then searches all around and finally finds colored flowers through a cave in Cobblestone Canyon after seeing a beautiful golden light. Ruta then tries to bring colored flowers to all the people of Pebbleton, but there's not enough to go around. To solve this problem, Ruta plants the hard black tears of the flowers and shines the golden light on them to grow new colored flowers, but there are still not enough to go around. Like I said, this is a very odd comic. It's very cryptic, but there's hidden meaning here. The mayor of Pebbleton then tasks Ruta with allocating the scarce colored flowers fairly to the people. Ruta writes her plans in the sand and decides to allocate flowers to the people, starting from the oldest Pebble person down to the youngest. Now, even though the model seems to work for a while, Ruta continues to look for more colored flowers in an attempt to ultimately return the people to Colorland forever. So what is the purpose of this cryptic Fed comic? Well, the Fed tells us the purpose in the teacher's guide that they released with the comic. This is directly from The Road to Ruta, a teacher's guide. The name of the teacher's guide is The Road to Ruta, and these are quotes right out of that book. Wishes and Rainbows is for elementary school children and may be read as a simple story or as an economic teaching tool. Wishes and Rainbows illustrates many economic concepts, including scarcity, supply and demand, and allocation. All of them, that's economics right there. It's very interesting that they had to write it in a strange comic book, but it's not far from the realm of what the Fed deals with. But they wrote more. One critical function that scarce commodities have often served is as commodity money. The scarcity of an item is one quality that makes it suitable for use as money, since limitations on supply serve to enhance its value. In addition, rarity precludes a sudden influx of the commodity, which could trigger a decrease in the money's value and result in inflation. Some items that have been used as money because of their scarcity include gunpowder, tobacco, animal skins, and precious metals. There we have the Federal Reserve Bank talking about scarcity and talking about why commodity money is desired, and ending it with, and they use precious metals. Interesting. That's all I have to say about that. Is the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, the anti-commodity money place, is saying that it can play a critical function in the monetary system. But they say more. The mayor of Pebbleton announces that since the colored flowers are so rare and valuable, they are going to be used as money with petals for change. So anybody who argues that this isn't a monetary allegory, this comic, the Fed Teacher's Guide just shot that one down right away. And here finally they say, has this analysis of the social and economic implications of Wishes and Rainbows overstretched the metaphor? For anyone who may think so, we call attention to the market for tulips in the 17th century Holland. Remember the tulip mania, the bubble, and that big deal was supposedly the first monetary collapse. All this is stated in the Fed Teacher's Guide, that there's more going on in this comic than what meets the eye. And I'll show you even more stuff in just a second here. Now we're going to go.
So this is Bix Weir's, 1+ hour presentation on The Road to Ruta, and it all centers around not just this comic, but he's multi-decade experience in the financial industry. He used to be involved with the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, and exposing the fixing of precious metals markets, rigging, the London fix. He has a YouTube channel. He's pretty prolific in his exposés of JP Morgan and their subsequent, involvement, the deep state, etc., in rigging the crypto markets as well through the exchanges, etc. And so he's got this theory, and with one of the more interesting things, I couldn't find the actual time code in here, but he also postulates that Alan Greenspan is it's actually kind of a fact that he's one of the early financial computer programmers. He went to school with the inventor of the BASIC programming language, which was what all the early financial computers used. And he, using BASIC, programmed the first financial modeling programs, etc. And Bix says in his recent book, Age for Turbulence, on page 204, he actually did he apologize?
He blamed himself for the Y2K debacle
with the wrong amount of digits.
He programmed the digits allocated for the dates, and he held himself responsible for that.
And we know that Alan Greenspan was a gold bug, was more of a Ayn Rand sort of hard money guy before he seemingly was subsumed by the octopus that is the Federal Reserve, became the, what wasn't he called, the Oracle leading up to the mortgage crisis. He was this grand wizard, literally portrayed in the media essentially as a wizard sitting at a computer with a bunch of dials and stuff.
True.
Like making
many of us remember him as just absolute blabbering nonsense,
these massive spectacles and these teeny beady little eyes.
He was great at just saying nothing.
There is no relationship between the office of the president and the Federal Reserve. We determine whatever we feel like.
No, what does he say? No law can overrule what.
No, the one where he says that the Treasury cannot default. They can just keep printing the money. That one.
In this morning's movers and shakers, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan warns that a default by Greece is almost certain and could spill over to other parts of the global economy. Greenspan spoke to Charlie Rose at a Bloomberg Link event.
Sovereign debt of these peripheral countries is held very heavily by the European banks. And to the extent that Greece defaults and it spills over into the other peripheral countries, then you've got a situation in which banks will be up against the wall.
That wasn't the clip I was looking for. There's one where he says there's essentially nothing Congress can do to overrule what the Federal Reserve decides to do as far as interest rates are concerned.
Right.
Well, he's correct.
He is correct. And that's because Congress gave them that
Jerome
authority.
Powell more or less said on the 13th.
Right.
That it is not the Fed's job or responsibility to fix the economy.
Right.
Meanwhile, they've heisted and inflated dozens of trillions of dollars out of the economy.
The manipulation of interest rates has absolutely no basis in economic theory or economics for that matter. It's strictly political.
Well, yeah, because inherently with gold, you don't necessarily have interest rates. You have to, there's an initial investment in generating money stuff, but ultimately it's just a social decision that we make, what we determine to be money. And so interest rates were a banker's invention. It's not necessarily something that human beings transacting on an individual level use.
Oh yeah, no, it's all about usury and needing money to multiply itself.
Right.
The whole Shylock.
The Mandrake mechanism.
More money will be made.
The magician.
More money will be made on the money that is initially borrowed on a house than all the tradespeople who built the house.
Give me some of that money. Free money.
So Bix
That's right.
basically suggests that Alan Greenspan was in this position of subversion, I guess, by the powers that be, but he was also in a position to essentially design the Borg, the electronic financial system, and he's essentially arguing that now it's so rigged, and it's rigged to destroy itself. And this is whether it's rigged to destroy itself, or it's rigged and it's going to destroy itself, or it's just fucked and it's going to destroy itself. We're all arriving at the same sort of like inevitability, which is there's some sort of mass monetary multi-market quote global. It's really a human event that's happening.
It's all about Stockholm
is.
syndrome and mass trauma bonding. You know, they want everyone keyed into a system that just one day starts going red and just collapsing towards the ground, and everyone starts to panic, and they just capitulate all of their resistance to totalitarianism and just say, "Oh, just save us from the chart and we'll surrender everything."
But if you're watching on YouTube or DLive.tv or BitTube or BitChute or wherever this video is reaching you, what more evidence do you need that the market is electronically rigged than this article from November 14th, when the Dow closed
Today
at 27,691.4854488,934, just like the day before.
So that's 25 in Gematria, sort of reduced down.
There's your answer, orthogonal.
So if you add up all the numbers, 27691.
That's 10 decimals, right?
It's getting close to 26, and 26 is 213s, and that's a pretty big one. So,
Stocks go up, stocks go down. On Tuesday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average went absolutely nowhere.
Yeah,
a mystery.
That's not good.
It's a mystery, though, that finance geeks, journalists, and analysts have spent the time trying to unravel.
Because it doesn't show conviction for the market to go higher. So if you look at it technically, you're looking at a double doji. Let's see what it closes at tomorrow, and let's see if it just dojis out for the next 2 weeks.
But
doesn't go higher, doesn't go lower.
What are the
just nothing?
This is not reflective of
It's not reflective of anything.
Of a free market, though.
It's not a free market.
Because you would never arrive at such a ridiculously accurate price equivalence. Day over day, over 48 hours
in a free market. No,
that's
just
insane.
like the day before. I mean, what they're basically bragging about here is, look, we can price fix anything.
Right.
It's true. It's true.
We are the price controllers. I mean, just like the whole Grand Canyon gold glut. I mean, oil is the second most common fluid anywhere, second only to water. Okay, they set a quote unquote global price for gasoline based on oil conglomerate board meeting consensus talking points. That's it.
So
your livelihood is based on their opinion as to how much they would like to profit per what they would like to be taxed.
Right. So another huge development in the last week since we had our last episode are the just ongoing daily bailouts.
It's QE4.
QE5. QE5, right?
QE10, QE20. I mean, the Federal Reserve started in 1913. So
this one really
QE100.
takes the cake.
Offhand, can you explain what the repo auctions, reverse repos are?
Okay, well, it's tied to the bond markets, if I'm not mistaken. So you have all these negative yields all over the place and negative interest rates.
Right. So how do the sovereign bonds, deal with that essentially? And you've got the biggest financial institutions in the world going to each other essentially, they're literally
robbing
doing
Peter to pay Paul. I mean, it's everywhere.
It's like using your credit card to pay your energy bill, which you're never gonna pay. You're never gonna pay that credit card.
Sure.
So it just goes into this derivative black hole, and all it does is prop up the continuing, the illusion.
It's interesting.
And the electronic
you use that language, black hole, and prop up. Literally the private banks. Deutsche Bank specifically, I believe they're the largest private holder of derivatives. The private banks are literally losing faith in each other, because the debt has been rehypothecated so many times that they've lost literal faith in its value, and now they're turning to the central banks to bail them out. And it's just who did you have on in the video? The former CIA.
Jim Rickards.
Who's going to bail the central banks out? And
well, guess who is stolen from the very people who are supposed to bail out the banks in the future? It's like,
but this is crazy.
It wasn't your money to begin
these repos and reverse repos are to really cover the massive fraud going on, and in this derivative driven AI market simulation,
right? Algo matrix.
The econometric models, and again, what are the sheer odds of the market closing to the 10th decimal place 2 days in a row? That is just utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, it's them painting a chart. They're chartists.
But
they love worshiping.
They repost. But that's not good enough, and we're getting into the intradaily loans.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I mean,
you have to imagine it, because none of it's real.
Yeah,
it really isn't real.
What I wanted people to imagine what was people waking up, getting dressed, going to an office. There are these individuals, they are operations folks, right, who are actually pressing keys on a keyboard that are manipulating various systems that impact down from the top down for the financial system. That, I mean, it's really incredible. It's both complex, but it's also as simple as that. Like that, you really have a very few people hitting keys and so on that are perpetuating this insane, system that is hurtling towards a self-destructive, creative, destructive event. I mean,
because it's mystical monetarist manipulation is what they're engaged in. It's another one of these kind of occult practices where they're the economic priests in a way.
So for people who are critical of crypto, I just think that they don't understand it. They're like, oh, well, it's arbitrary, well, it's so if it is, it's at least equivalent to what you're using now. Right. So why not have one that's in your jurisdiction? Why not have a money system that's in your jurisdiction, not in someone else's jurisdiction? And that's the biggest difference, is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York serving the 2nd District of the nation. I mean, it's all under a political system, and Bitcoin is not.
Because regarding crypto, because those are subject to all these market manipulation forces as well, the Coinbase exchanges and all that. But even as manipulated as they are, they still serve as an index of how worthless all these centralized currencies really are.
That's a good point. Certainly. Socially, the rise of cryptocurrency is a reflection of the total dissatisfaction with the fiat money system. But you wanted to say something, Xavier, about...
Well, okay, so with Bitcoin, it is at least vulnerable to mining pool monopolization. Because, I mean, most of the mining pools are in China at this point.
Right.
So it's not to say that, and also I have my own theory that corroborates with a Wired magazine journalist that Satoshi could be Paul LaRue, the former the former pharmaceutical black marketeer, and he was an extremely genius programmer. And he went under one alias that was extremely similar to Satoshi. The odds are extremely weird with that. So I don't know. I think that maybe some of this China trade war stuff that's going on is actually over Bitcoin, and it's all behind the scenes to a great extent because the U.S. holds Paul LaRue. Like he's in prison under their jurisdiction.
Right. I heard. Is that who Big Swear was talking about the other day? He has one of his Bitcoins that's like up in the mix.
Is that the?
Are they one of the same?
Is that the Mt. Gox guy?
I don't think he's affiliated with Mt. Gox. Although I think Kobayashi is that the guy who's the trustee who can kind of just unload on the market thousands of Bitcoin whenever he deems the price right.
The guy at the bottom of the coffee cup.
That raises an interesting point. And that was the recent statement by Chris Giancarlo, formerly of the CFCT.
He was supposed to do the work of the White Hats, according to
Bix.
To Big Swear.
There is a whole lot of fuckery with Bitcoin. I
there is.
shouldn't have said it wasn't political. I shouldn't have, but I should have said socially, the crypto movement.
It's still fringe.
It's
still kind of on the periphery to where it's cool and it's
it
like,
creates the
cyberpunk
potential to eschew a political influence on your money stuff.
Sure.
And that's the biggest thing to me. It's like, maybe Bitcoin doesn't deliver on that promise 100%, but it's moving us in that direction.
Yeah,
and it's
I would disagree that it's fringe. I think it's becoming more adopted for means of transactions and exchange. I think that the things like the Litecoin card or the crypto cards are somewhat of a step in the right direction, but you still have to go through a third party, effectively your Visa or MasterCard services seemingly. But you can go on Craigslist and there's a crypto option. You can pay for lots of.
Well, even Square now.
Exactly.
You can buy Bitcoin on Square, and it's kind of like wow. And you can get a debit card too, so you can immediately cash out at a fee, of course. But it's better than any ATM that you could go to.
What's so interesting?
These big financial services are coming in, and they really do want to swoop into crypto. And I think that Bitcoin, it has the first mover advantage, it has the networking effect and everything. But in all honesty, in terms of blockchain product, it's really not that hot. There are better offerings out there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a buyer of it, but just continuing with this thread, right? I think what you see with Libra, and for viewers, I've got Zuckerberg, he testified to Congress recently, and you see the value of decentralization in Bitcoin, Litecoin, many of these alternative products. Golden is one of your picks, right? When you decentralize the the mining, there's a huge value in that just from a jurisdictional point of view, because like here's Facebook trying to create their own crypto. They are a registered business. And all of the co-signers or the supporters, the other corporate backers of the Libra project, they too have registered trade style names. They're legal entities in multiple countries. They're easy to prosecute. They're easy to summon. They've got representatives. Now, you're right. Maybe the Bitcoin miners are corporatized as well, but isn't there the potential there that you could feasibly have just a bunch of very individual nodes sitting in countries all over the world and So the ability to sort of obstruct the propagation of a new money is hardened. It's made more difficult by that decentralization factor, which is really, to me, all these countries, they want their pound of flesh. They don't want an alternative to their own fiat money with Libra. And so they're like, oh, well, you're a business. You're not even in this business yet. We're just going to fuck you over. We're going to make a mockery of you. We're going to drag you through the mud publicly. We're also going to threaten you with more regulations. Like in India, they're not happy with crypto in India. So they're like really coming down hard on Facebook. They're like, we're going to like take you out of the market completely if you start bringing Libra in here. And so, but they can't, they can try to ban Bitcoin in India, but
you can't. It's interesting. In a lot of these,
not on an individual level,
third world countries that have currency collapse of whatever variety, you see oftentimes that SIM card cell phones are havens or bastions to shield wealth from hyperinflation from whatever cryptocurrencies these rogue citizens are attempting to have means of exchange with, on their SIM card cell phones, because that is a more realistic means of preserving their wealth than in putting faith in the state fiat money.
True. I mean, the unbanked, you're talking about billions of people that have gone from...
You want to take a haircut?
Right.
The Cyprus... I guess that's what Alan Greenspan was talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
That was before the whole Greece haircut that's ridiculous.
When you just look at the fees, right? Like if I want to pay you $380, right? It's going to cost me $11 to give you that money with my Amex.
Well, you've made an excellent point in private regarding the haircuts or penalty for possessing your money. You made the excellent point, Dave, that we already have that in this country in the identity of like an ATM fee or a bank closure fee. That people pay these time and time again throughout their week,
right?
Per se, or if they go into the check cashing place, if you happen to be impoverished or you don't have a bank, or maybe you've been written out of the privilege of possessing, a banking account, you pay a fee. You get the haircut to access effectively what is your private
never mind
property.
The fact that in order to bank in America these days, you have to subject yourself to, you have to basically pledge allegiance to a political ideology ever before setting foot in the bank to do business. Because you have to first have a social security number.
Yeah, you cannot buy or sell unless it bears his name.
That's right.
It's very mark of the beast.
Yeah, and the number, the social security number goes back to something they did even before that, and that's the enumeration at birth. They did that like earlier on, and.
So what did sorry to interrupt you. What did Social Security's start at? We're at like I have a 9-digit.
Oh, as far as the number is concerned,
we all
that's an interesting story.
Yeah,
that's an interesting story that has a lot to do with Ross Perot. Ross Perot worked for IBM, and IBM is, I think they're the ones who came up with the whole Social Security number system.
Interestingly,
because they were also
they were so proficient with
they
the
were
holograph.
linked up with IG Farben and all those guys are in the linking up with the Nazi finance.
But Ross Perot was an early IBM salesman, and he just like blew his number out. He became a millionaire. He invested that. He made a bunch of smart decisions and stuff. But some of the software that he was selling was to the government for the early development of like the Social Security enumeration system.
I guess, has it ever been less than 9 digits?
I don't know the answer
Are
to
there
that
fewer
question.
ones? Like, is there a 01?
I don't know, but it's
or a
it's
00? Who's the original copy? I mean,
there is a, I think I came across an article once about like, it may not have been like the very first Social Security beneficiary, but one of the very first ones who,
that's in the Road to Ruta comic.
And
by the
those
way.
people,
they talk about,
they did make off because it is a Ponzi scheme. And those people, the early ones, they got a lot of benefit out of it. But you and me and our generation, they admit they're not going to get anything.
It's used as a control grid more than anything else. It's there to be a sort of tokenizing instrument of your
that was
as a human resource for the state.
Right. I don't know if it was Jerome Powell who said it, but regarding their, I guess, lack of responsibility in servicing the nation's debt. Let's see, what did they say? Here we go. I would be remiss in not pointing out that the consequence of not addressing it is just that our kids and grandkids will be spending their tax dollars servicing debt rather than on the things that they need. I guess that's where you're talking about in terms of this debt and value-based societies or economies.
Yeah, like when people,
right.
When
That's
people
true.
start, like they can't buy food at the grocery store because their ATM machine doesn't spit out any money or their card doesn't work. They're not going to care about the piece of paper that comes in the mail about their student loan.
Of course not.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, it's going to be a situation where people just don't show up to work. So it could be a very peaceful event. In my calculation,
I think so.
They're going to try and deliberately make it violent.
Yeah,
I think is the sort of broader.
It would
point
be
of my
through
argument.
artificial means that it's violent.
It almost always is. I mean, if you look at all of the quote unquote terrorist events that have happened in the United States,
but
nearly all of them. I mean, 98 out of 100 have some sort of FBI involvement.
Right, and then every once in a while you get a serial killer or a mass, like just a crazy
and then they
person.
inflate the impact and danger of that
the
through
Popeyes
media
chicken
control.
sandwich mentality.
Yeah.
And while stigmatizing everyone who can see the obvious broader pattern, which is them fomenting the violence themselves for political purposes,
Right.
divide and conquer control schemas. So it's across the board, and it's a widespread tactic. And I just see it coming to bear with the multi-market crash. I could see this crash being an actual springboard for a kind of sectarian war. I mean, I hate the term civil war because it's kind of an oxymoron. I mean, are civilizations truly civilizations if they're built on sheer bloodshed? I mean,
That's an excellent point. If they were civil, would they
how
be at war?
Right. I think this term civil war is kind of a psyop in itself. That it's a misclassification designed to cement the myth that you can be civil and slaughter one another. And I think that when you get right down to it, it's always a sectarian or a coalition war. It's a war of different coalitions, but that doesn't mean that it's civil.
Right.
Coalitions tend towards authoritarian, tyrannical behavior if they're heavily centralized, consolidated, well-funded, and can operate with impunity.
Right.
And if they write the laws around them to insulate themselves from accountability, then they have carte blanche capabilities to do and perform whatever sick acts they want. And this circles back in actually with Epstein, because Robert Maxwell was a software guy. He was the one that peddled a lot of the Promise software, which was the initial grid for the surveillance networks that were later picked up on by Google, by Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all coming to a head, and I can definitely see from a psychopathic point of view wanting to maintain this artificial system that gives you so much free reign to do, you know, the amoral, sadistic things that a psychopath would be into. But as far as, you know, the choices that people have to make, I mean, as far as the Civil War is concerned, I mean, I do think things are going to trend towards cooperation, but they're going to have to make some hard choices before we get from here to there. And for viewers, I've got an article up here. It's a Forbes article, and it's about the new question on your, quote, your 1040 as the IRS gets serious about cryptocurrency. And it says, goes on, days after the Internal Revenue Service released 2 new pieces of guidance for taxpayers who engage in transactions involving virtual currency, the IRS announced another compliance measure, a checkbox on Form 1040. The checkbox, which appears on the early release draft of the Form 1040, asks taxpayers about financial interests in virtual currency. The checkbox appears on the second early release draft of the 2019 Form 1040, Schedule 1, Additional Income and Adjustments to Income. And it says, the question is, at any time during 2019, did you receive, sell, send, exchange, or otherwise acquire any financial interest in any financial currency? And I mean, this is the most ridiculous overreaching of jurisdiction that I can possibly think of, but it's really emblematic of the position the IRS has taken. On their color of law publications, which the Supreme Court has ruled you cannot rely on for following the law, they would have you believe that any financial interest in any virtual currency, okay, first of all, you have to agree to their terms. Virtual currency, what is a virtual currency to you? Like, what is currency between you and me as a human being?
Virtual currency. That's extremely vague.
Have a financial interest. Think about the definition of currency, it being, quote, virtual, and me having a financial interest. Why do I have to report that to a corporation known as the United States? I don't understand that.
This is just a draft, dude.
I mean, the idea is we own all of your money.
We own you.
And we give you
you're
permission
the
to
serf.
use our money, and yet your labor goes to pay the interest on the fake money that we give you permission to use.
Well, here's their definition. And by the way, you can't rely on this website for following the law.
No, you cannot.
It's just a publication. And actually, it specifies the unique exclusive jurisdiction, which is small businesses and self-employed, which has a further definition in the code that would... The code. But it says virtual currency is a digital representation of value that functions as a medium of exchange. So they're not just going to take control of the... It's so fascinating. They basically have to acknowledge this, because prior to this, well, what is fiat money? That's the unit of exchange. It's like, it's amazing they even admitted that there is such a thing as another unit of exchange that isn't another government fiat money. But they have no choice because it was an invention.
And they're talking about convertible virtual currency. In other words, it intermingles with our real money.
But hold on. What is convertible? Someone else wanting to transact. So if I pay you dollars for your virtual currency, that's converting the virtual currency for the dollars that I gave you.
But when
why
you
do
buy
they have a financial
anything-
interest in that? Why do they have a financial interest in that?
I don't think was the IRS coming down on people for World of Warcraft swords or whatever.
That's a
else
great question.
was going on?
That's a great question.
Because a lot of these game
I guess
platforms,
that value would have been deemed nominal as
but
something you like to talk about.
But honestly, even nominal stuff, you can almost always find a Bitcoin pair somewhere. At this point, even the most arcane currencies that are peddled in games. So you could turn 500,000 hours of Warcraft
you make an excellent point. I remember we passed a juncture where World of Warcraft currency was worth more than whatever Venezuelan denomination that they were using at the time.
Right.
That it had literally...
Isn't that just amazing?
It's ridiculous. I mean, come on. Like
the hubristic paternalism is just off the charts. It's just, well, we need to decide for you how you can best spend your money.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I just...
unreal.
It's just like regarding the IRS, it's like when they catch drug dealers or middle class kingpins per se that have nice cars or like a couple of houses,
right?
And it's and then they just confiscate it and take it away, for over tax evasion. And it's like, you mean to tell me that's the wealth I could accrue if I didn't pay taxes? Like I could live like a poor rap star.
Right.
Right. Essentially, I mean, if you have the right connections, you can, make sure that you avoid scrutiny.
Or how about all the allegations by all the the financial geeks that can't figure out why the Dow closed the exact same decimal point 10 times out day over day, that they can't figure out. They say, oh, Bitcoin cryptocurrency, it enables drug dealers and terrorists and all these other people. They don't understand what function fiat money has provided. I mean, there are so many stories you can look at if you search the news for like between 2002 to now, like since the Iraq war started, all the instances where these various proxy armies were provided pallets of cash or electronic debiting of monies or stacks of gold.
Right.
It's not like those instruments aren't used for those same criminal enterprises
I mean,
either.
It occurs 100-fold on the fiat currency.
Right.
The only difference is that power is not centralized in the same manner.
Right. So they can't see exactly in the ease of fashion that they prefer regarding how the transactions are allocated, who's connecting which funds where, and all that. So it's like we have to stigmatize this because it's an inconvenience to our monopoly grid.
Right.
And it's so obvious that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and they got some very high IQ people working on that.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can tar and feather it as just something that lowlifes participate in, you can convince most people that are in their pension funds and IRAs and 401ks to just stay there while they rate it, basically. While they use inflation to erode their money gradually and boil the pot slowly. And that's what they're counting on, is that people don't look to these other instruments as a way of liberating their money supply, but rather see it as a fringe, problem that only, bad people do. And they do that with the term conspiracy theorists. I mean,
right.
That was their big, now it's, hate speech or
flat earther.
Flat earther. Or,
sure.
Whatever it may be. There's all these assortment of terms.
But it was someone at Deutsche Bank who made a publication within the month, or is it in October? But in the event of a financial collapse, that gold could be used as a means of a financial reset, which is very interesting to hear a banker say that, because that's literally what the tinfoil hats have seemingly been saying for ages and era.
It remains to be seen how that would happen, though, logistically, because central banks hold so much of it.
But do they? Do they really?
I mean, how many gold bars do you or me have? Like, compared to, I think most of it's all locked up and.
I suppose. I mean, a lot of it allegedly is in national parks and.
Well, that's true. I mean, as far as underground supplies,
offhand exchanges, I could say the same thing about the number of cars that I possess.
But if we were to return to a gold standard, nobody has. Very, very few people have any savings in it. So how would they get it from those places to their pocket to actually use it?
I mean, the volatility would just be ridiculous. The market would have to come to a consensus on what they purport to be the total finite amount of gold in circulation at any given time.
I tend to agree with Bix that in one of these very volatile situations, silver is probably a better thing for the average person to use as a medium of exchange, in addition to cryptocurrencies, if we have the electric grid, because many people still do have at least like silverware or stuff like that. But he also says that, number one, there's probably more gold than there is silver, because there's all these like unknown quantities that are above ground. But also much of the silver that has been mined, it's been consumed in like little tiny electronics. So it just goes into junkyards and it's not actually like fungible. It's not like, you don't have it in coinage, and it would be very costly and expensive and toxic to retrieve in that manner. And he said the industrial applications of silver are actually far surpass gold when you look at like electronics, LCDs, solar panels, all this industrial activity that needs silver versus gold. So I think he makes a pretty strong argument for that. But it's kind of up for debate. What's going to be used?
As long as the dollar can be used to, protect the market.
The military-backed dollar. I think we're going to be in a post-dollar world.
So,
within probably 10 to 12 years.
Long?
I think they're going to fight long and hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to take forever to take down the Federal Reserve and the IRS.
Yeah.
10 to 12 years
but,
is optimistic.
I mean, forever, it's been a little over 100 years.
I know, and they are at the precipice, especially with these manipulated, painted charts and stuff that they're doing with the major indices.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just at the point where it's just like this... hum-de-dum, like maybe I'll just keep going higher.
It's a matter, dude.
I think it'll happen sooner.
It's
I think
a matter
it'll happen much sooner.
Keeping...
The dollar will be nixed. I think that the dollar could be nixed, but that these legacy financial systems will still probably be in place for a while. I think that they might switch to something like an Amero that is like a crypto. Ripple type coin, and then that becomes denominated with banks, and the banks could easily just adopt this digital currency and substitute it for bank ledgers and debt amounts and everything. And it's like these legacy systems are still going to be in place, but they're going to be using a digital sort of mask, a digital currency mask, to hide their ongoing fraud.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I hope it doesn't. That's my prediction.
When you have Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress talking about the Libra, I liken it to, I guess, what Franklin Roosevelt did in '33 when they made it illegal to hoard gold, right? And they confiscated the gold, and to their claim, it was because it left them without the capacity to issue adequate liquidity to deal with the financial crisis, which was, again, a result of their own monetary policy. So, you know, and not to mention, you know, centralizing a cryptocurrency is completely antithetical to why you would have a cryptocurrency. And to Big, you know, again, coming back to Big Swear's point, something that Alan Greenspan did before he stepped down from Fed chair in 2007 is, unless I'm mistaken, is Glass-Steagall was replaced, right?
It was repealed.
It was repealed. Well, it was replaced with something else. Was that 2007 when he stepped down, or was that during the...
I think Glass-Steagall
the Clinton
was repealed
administration
earlier than that.
Yeah, I think it was the Clinton administration that did that. But it, either way, Big Swear describes it as Alan Greenspan giving the banks enough rope to hang themselves, and out of that you have just a ridiculous derivative market. You know, you have
that's when they began mixing the depositors' money with speculative funds.
Is it the corporate banks can now invest in the commodities,
and also other traditional instruments could be rehypothecated into to the subprime mortgage. So, like,
exactly,
you know, they created derivatives that were, you know, resold, you know, into 401ks and stuff like this.
So, like, when we look at the debt clock, like, that's not even scratching the surface. That's not a tip of the iceberg.
That's the slave clock, right?
That's just the slave clock, you know.
That's the slave. Yeah, that's what the collateral in the U.S. and the people they've identified as
something that I wanted to say earlier. You know, when we were talking about what benefit it would be from concealing, I guess, maybe the shape of the plane or existence that we're on, is the tale of the Flatlanders, and you know, the two-dimensional people, you know, that can't see in the three-dimensional world, and you know, like that Carl Sagan Cosmos episodes where he talks about the Tesseract and all that. And it's funny you mentioned the slave clock, you know, because that's the reality that they see as these numbers, and they are limited capacity to understand the reality that they describe, where you know, when you get into these derivatives and these you know,
like, what's your relationship to it?
Exactly.
What's your relationship?
You know, and it's not real. You know, it's completely intangible.
That's why I see it as, like, I want to believe.
I think it's going to
like
happen
a
sooner.
snow day.
I think it's going to happen
like a snow
sooner.
Day, right? Where people just don't show up to work. Like, when this system collapses, right? All these parasites that get dressed and go to City Hall, they don't have a mechanism to earn a living anymore.
They have no more subjects.
Right.
They have no subjects to command.
And so, I don't know if Bix used the phrase or you used it or know it or made it up, but in terms of the possibility, Xavier, of a white hat conspiracy, versus, you know, like human nature just manifesting itself this way. One potential motive Woodrow Wilson might have had to implement the Federal Reserve in lieu of this alleged discovery of mass quantities of gold is that if this cat is out of the bag, you have a king without a kingdom. And so orthogonal reptilian's point was that they needed to implement the Federal Reserve to basically create the PR arm that convinces the public that the gold is limited and these receipts represent that limited collateral, and you're going to deal with that, and so on. Versus, hey, gold is all the fuck over the place. There's tons of it. We aren't really in a state of scarcity. We're in a state of abundance, and we can totally industrialize. We've got Tesla technology,
Nikola Tesla
technology, coming on the horizon here, and you don't even really need money.
Right. I mean, that's the main thing is, if we're really going to be a genuine civilization
of a higher density,
right, and of a higher caliber, I mean, this mammon worship really has to be completely deflated into like a nothing burger, like voluntary system.
So crypto almost is just
it's like a flag. It's like a reversal flag that's happening on the chart of human dependence on money.
I mean, make no mistake,
I would like to think so.
This popped up in the midst of the financial cataclysms of 2008. These white papers and
I have a great link I've always wanted to play on the show concerning 2008 and what happened at that point and what's been happening basically ever since then. This is Paul Kanjorski. He's on the Capital Markets Subcommittee. He's the chairman, and he's talking about the bailout situation. If you talk to any boomers about this, I mean, they were freaking out that the ATMs were going to turn
and
off.
I don't blame them.
I don't blame them, right? They don't know any different, right? So, anyways,
That's
this
what
is
they've been
pure gold.
conditioned to think of as money.
Absolutely no.
Let me.
Nobody is accounting for what they're spending. You got people and families out here in the United States that are struggling. I just paid $600 worth of utility bills in 1 week.
Yes.
All right? I haven't got enough money to feed my family, but I make too much to give food stamps. I don't even make $10 an hour.
Right.
Now, if you took that money and subdivided it between the taxpayers in this country, we would stimulate the economy. You know why? Because we'd go out and pay off bills, pay off tax debts, create jobs, and buy stuff that we need.
Caller.
That's how you stimulate the economy. I'll take my answer off the phone.
Thank you. Appreciate it. From Flint,
Okay,
Michigan.
and I understand that frustration. Quite frankly, I'm equally frustrated as you are. I'm not necessarily in your particular experience or circumstance to be that frustrated, but I'm frustrated too. But it's because of the misconceptions out there that things were done that are misunderstood. We did not give the $700 billion for the purpose of lending money. That was never in the program. It was misconstrued initially and put together with the suggestion by the Secretary of Treasury that we would be buying what we called dirty assets, defective mortgages and securities that were held in these banks, that the government would find a way to create a market, buy them in, take them off the balance sheets of the banks so that the banks could continue to function normally.
Did you support that?
I supported that, but also part of the bill, we gave the jurisdiction and authority to the Secretary of Treasury to make investments in banks. He had very wide authority because, quite frankly, we're not the experts on the Hill as to how to solve this problem, and the problem is a multifaceted problem, so we gave great flexibility to the Secretary of Treasury to act.
So what would you say, though, then, to somebody who says Paul Kanjorski is supporting Wall Street but not Main Street with this latest $825 billion package now moving through the House?
They are right to this extent. Why did we do that? We did that because the Secretary... Look, I was there when the Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve came those days and talked with members of Congress about what was going on. It was about September 15th. Here's the facts, and we don't even talk about these things. On Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the Federal Reserve noticed a tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion was being drawn out in a matter of an hour or two. The Treasury opened up its window to help. They pumped $105 billion in the system and quickly realized that they could not stem the tide. We were having...
Okay. Where do we start? So
So this is his response to someone calling out this oligopolist system for purely enriching the creators of the fake money supply.
Right.
And his response is, "Oh, you misunderstand, but that is exactly what we do." Like, if you sum up everything he just said, yeah, you're right, but I can't admit to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we
I have to use a bunch of gobbledygook.
aren't the
jargon.
experts in solving this problem. The people who created the problem are the experts in solving the problem. So we're going to give wide authority and jurisdiction to them to solve it. And part of that process is to create a market to buy toxic assets. Seriously.
Dirty assets. What in the fuck is he talking about?
So you're talking about debt created out of nothing that has an interest rate. It's not based on
This
labor.
is where
It's
a
not based
debt
on
jubilee
services. It's not
starts
based
to
on
make a lot of sense to me.
It's not the jubilation present in the days of Babylon, though. Like, this is something very, very different.
It's
different.
It's different and it's more precarious.
This doesn't happen every 7 years.
Right.
70 years.
70 years
right.
or whenever. This is like a different manifestation
Beast
altogether.
But
Beast
what
is a
were
good
we on the
word.
precipice of? Let's listen to Paul talk about it.
An electronic run on the banks. They decided to close the operation, close down the money accounts, and announce a guarantee of $250,000 per account so there wouldn't be further panic out there. And
That was another thing I want to say. He says the Federal Reserve noticed that there was an immense drawdown in money market accounts. Okay, let's break it apart. I said earlier, you've got a bunch of people at a desk. He says the Federal Reserve. It's like people in their mind, they see the columns in a building and they're just like, this building, they're so wise. They see this drawdown and they have to intervene to fix it. They saw this drawdown and so they opened their window. He just uses this language like the average person is going to know what the fuck he's talking about. They opened their window to stem the tide. That's where the repos and the reverse repos and the intraday loans and
euphemisms and this jargon that they use, this nominalism.
Yeah.
They're just trying to glaze it over in front of you and say, "Oh, well, these are the right terms. I'm sure you may not understand, but I'm going to use them anyway because this is reality that I'm dictating to you presently." And it's just so condescending and ridiculous that this guy would have this as a response to what he just heard.
And he knows that like the average person listening to C-SPAN at this time is probably making, $50,000 a year, let's just say. And so he uses the term $550 billion, and he just like enunciates like with such authority, and it's like he knows that that's such a large quantity. It could have been any number. He could just fucking said 400.
It could have been. It's relative.
Yeah, but the Fed just injected over $2 trillion.
But it's true. What was the number? The slave number you say was like 790, or whatever the bailout.
The national debt. Oh,
so here we are in. We'll see what Congress does this month, because we're in the midst of these overnight repos and intradaily repos and this fast money relative to this rising generation, X or whatever the fuck they want to call it. What is that number gonna ring a bell for this rising generation? No, it certainly didn't for any of us. I think when we were that age, like $790 billion, like we didn't know what kind of relationship we
like. Yeah,
inversely, if we had been any older, that number would have had a completely different relationship to us, where it meant that we couldn't retire, or we had to go back to work, or we lost everything. It's all very relative.
Well, it wasn't at Chertoff that came out in front of Congress and was like, "Look, you need to give us these funds, or else
the economy as you know it will be collapsed by tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, there were
Is that economic terrorism? Like,
There
that sounds like
were
hostage tactics.
literally we'll have to pull up those clips or provide those clips, but there were those meetings actually described. I think there's a freaking Netflix like retrospective. Maybe was Tim Geithner in there, or was that a more recent machination? Anyways, whoever the Treasury Secretary, there was a retrospective on Netflix, and they were describing these very much like I'm saying, you know, a few people at a computer, like Winter Soldier, Captain America, some fucking super brain computer with a grizzled old, like, I just imagine like Alan Greenspan dressed like Gandalf, like sitting at the computer, like pressing some buttons, and this is gonna like solve what the problem created by the interventionists in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's so circuitous, it's ridiculous. You know, Orthogonal wanted me to mention derivatives in this episode because derivatives, there's so many different types of derivatives at this point. It's impossible even to calculate how much currency there is, how much money stuff there is.
The aggregate gross transaction sums between
it's
all
impossible.
parties.
There's
it's
no
impossible.
Uniform.
It's in the quadrillions.
Even
it is. I think that you know the slaves, you know, that don't realize that they're serfs, you know, they don't really understand what a derivative is, or certainly not what their relationship is to it.
No, and I found this really funny. Understanding derivatives, generally belonging to the realm of advanced investing, derivatives are secondary securities whose value is solely based or derived on the value of the primary security that they are linked to. In and of itself, a derivative is worthless.
It's just notional bets.
I really didn't expect for the definition to be so obvious when I asked for it.
It's pretty literal.
On Investopedia.
Yeah, it's pretty
in and of itself.
But Bix has said, and I think I agree, and most, you know, even a Jim Rickards, an institutional head's going to agree that when the derivative market goes, it all goes. And so you have to watch the, like you were saying earlier, Deutsche Bank, some of the, you know, JP Morgan, I think, you know, some of these, there's some others we could name, you know, when their derivative portfolios really aren't performing, they start laying people off, selling off parts of their business, rebranding.
But will it look like that? You know, you mentioned JP Morgan, which, you know, evaluated WeWork in the anywhere from like 93 to 134 million, and you know they're bankrupt. They couldn't even afford severance pay. So will it manifest?
It should look like people getting arrested.
You make an excellent point.
At the end of the day, that's what it should look like. What it will look like, I don't know. It may actually, it should look like people getting arrested. It will probably look like a lot of people committing suicide, and some people getting arrested, and other people probably ratting others out and getting some sort of like benefit package, or you know, you can go live on this island, or you can take a lighter sentence, that sort of thing. I think that's how it's going to dismantle, just generally speaking.
Oh, yeah,
but in the
SoftBank, aren't they the ones that they're taking it over? Or were they the ones
the winners of the war
that bought up the WeWork? Yeah, I think so.
What the war
you're
crimes
right.
are.
But SoftBank's another one of those
they're horrible.
massive ones.
They're horrible.
But all right, so man, the economy. There's one more thing on here that we never got to really talk about, and that is Google's claim to quantum supremacy, which is more of a computing technology thing, but it had a lot of play in the crypto media because of the idea that, and I think you even mentioned you hedged yourself a bit on
NVIDIA, right?
actually NVIDIA, yeah, briefly.
Because that's what a lot of people were doing. They were repurposing the graphics processors to mine.
Which is a linear silicon-based process that would be appended potentially, that's the claim anyways, by quantum computing, but whether that will happen. So what do you think of this? Maybe we should just watch. Can we?
Yeah, let's see the Google vid, the Alphabet propaganda. Because this showed up either on the same day or around the time.
The tantalizing promise of quantum computers is that they can do certain tasks exponentially faster than classical machines. And the quantum supremacy experiment is proof that this is indeed the case.
The word quantum computer is a little bit misleading because it sounds like a computer. And when people think of computer, they think of a phone or a laptop. The truth is the phone and the laptop and even a very powerful supercomputer all operate according to the same fundamental rules. And a quantum computer is fundamentally different.
The classical bit stores information as a 0 or 1, and a quantum bit can be both 0 and 1 at the same time. If you have 2 quantum bits, then there are 4 possible states that you can put in superposition. With 3 qubits.
Another sphere.
More sphere cuckery.
Another
incredible.
Sphere cucking.
Sphere cuckery in your
This
face.
isn't what quantum
Round 3.
reality. I mean, like Richard Feynman described. He attempted to draw pictures of quantum reality and was, nearly cast out by his peers and constituents. And here we are watching, graphical presentations of it here today. This is ridiculous.
Yes.
The qubit.
What is the value of this?
The qubit.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really clear what these processors are actually able to do.
Well, they admit, even some of the engineers admitted that this is basically a proof of concept,
right?
And the practical applications of it are, in the best estimates, decades away. And what's interesting to me is they say the practical applications are decades away, but this can solve calculations that traditional computers couldn't solve for 10,000 years. Now, if 10,000 years go by and you've invented quantum computing, how do you know? How can you calculate what those other machines, other supercomputers, would be calculating in that time?
Right.
What? I guess they're taking.
It almost sounds like a grandfather paradox.
Well, yeah. How do you determine the future of something that has no precedence?
Well, they would have to take the calculation, I guess they're using in this quantum compute engine, their qubit engine or whatever, and actually try to do it in the supercomputer. Did they do that? How would they know that it would take 10,000 years?
Right. It seems like more speculative scientismic babble a little bit to me. When they do these speculative projections, either forward or backwards, it's almost always duplicitous in some way because it's kind of guesswork.
Well, also we know Google's working with China, and it's in their technological best interest to claim that they have set a precedent. It would discourage competition from trying the same or to, out innovate them or whatever. So let's just continue to watch and see what they say.
4 qubits at 16, it grows exponentially.
The nice thing about quantum supremacy is that it is a very well-defined engineering milestone.
In a nutshell, what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that experimental quantum computers
can surpass the best supercomputers in the world.
To actually demonstrate quantum supremacy, we have these 3 steps. First, pick a circuit. Second, run it on the quantum computer. Third, simulate what the quantum computer is doing on a classical computer. We gradually increase the complexity of that circuit. At some point, it becomes completely impossible for the classical computer to keep up. Then we say we've achieved quantum supremacy.
We started building together the quantum chips to do this experiment. And then the evolution of the devices with more and more qubits and more complexity. It's very much an iterative process.
A lot of the work that we put in was not just these chips, but is also the infrastructure that you need to drive those chips. The cryostats that we install them in, all of the control electronics, software, all of this stuff is needed, and it all has to be developed.
When the experiment started, we were getting data from the experimentalists. We saw initially a beautiful straight line corresponding to our predictions.
Then, right before we hit supremacy, it dropped much faster and it fell below the threshold where it needed to be.
And there's nothing we can do because we don't know how to analyze past that. So everyone's like, oh, we're screwed because it's getting really, really bad at large number of qubits.
It's like, well, maybe there's some really complex interaction between all the qubits.
It turned out that the reason was rather benign. We calibrated a little bit better and then this problem disappeared.
So there wasn't like oh, we did it.
I think we crossed it, and then it wasn't clear that we crossed it, so we crossed it a little bit further.
It took me like a day to realize, like, hold on, this is actually experimental data. It's kind of amazing to see, how well the theory works.
The processor that achieved quantum supremacy is called the Sycamore processor.
And it's parallel processing 2 to the 53 states, which is 10 million billion. And thus that enormous amount of parallel processing is what gives it the power.
When we run small chunks of the computation in the largest supercomputer in the world, our estimate is that it will take thousands of years to complete the full computation.
Technologies are born this way. Let's say the space age started with a satellite orbiting Earth, and it was not doing much, it was just beeping.
The big technical achievement of quantum supremacy was really dependent on all this young talent who's kind of taken this and gotten it to work at a very technologically capable level.
We have reached a new computational capability. There are certain computations, the only place in the world where you can compute those things is here in our data center at Google Santa Barbara.
For the first time, we're showing that we can solve a problem that is just infeasible to do on the biggest computers ever made by civilization.
And what's exciting is now we're ready to turn this over to the world and say, let's figure out what we can do with this.
The thing that excites me most is building a useful quantum computer. When we can give a researcher a tool that is unlike any other and say, great, figure out something cool to do with it. Mankind is pretty good at that.
Pop quiz. How many spheres did you see in that promotional video?
2 to 10 million billion.
Not as many as I saw in Disney's Avengers Endgame Quantum World.
Ugh.
True. I mean, it's like, wait, we're not even really that good at solving simple problems.
I don't know.
Why are we putting billions of dollars into imagining hypothetical, speculative problems that can only be solved with this specialized, infeasible instrument?
They're talk about chartism. You
It's
see
just
all the charts that they have charting the simulation of another computer against their hypothetical quantum computer.
It's like, what kind of data are you even collecting? And it's like, you can create a processor complex enough to generate like really interesting looking patterns and pictures, but then if you just extrapolate from those patterns and pictures and infer and induce a bunch of data that suggests a certain model, then how is that any different from just kind of imagining the model in the first place with a technological oracle that confirms your pre-existing desire to create a model this way? Like, in other words, the epistemology behind this stuff is so non-transparent. It borders on it's metaphysics again. It's more of this atomic voodoo,
but you know,
it's quantum voodoo now.
One of the things that Google and some of these advanced technology companies are good at is producing hardware that is high performing, right? And they use it. It can be used for all sorts of different things. There's different applications and so on. Practically, there's nothing really touted here except a technological achievement that is almost purely hypothetical at this point, and totally self-interested. I mean, like it's what technology companies do is they want to brag about like their achievements and so on, and their disruption of their various market spaces and so on. Whether or not this makes Google, unstoppable or not, I think that's what they would want people to believe. It remains to be seen, but they can use their technology to, unleash all sorts of control mechanisms and so on. And like one of the things that they have that sort of has really hit the mainstream recently is the whole deep fake stuff. And that gets into one of the main topics. Another topic we want to talk about is that's the since we last spoke, the al-Baghdadi fiasco. Where okay, so let's take a little
trip down
memory lane and go watch Obama reporting on the death of Osama bin Laden, which has so many parallels, right?
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by the worst attack on the American people in our history. The images of 9/11 are seared into our national memory. Hijacked planes cutting through a cloudless September sky, the Twin Towers collapsing to the ground, black smoke billowing up from the Pentagon, the wreckage of Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where the actions of heroic citizens saved even more heartbreak and destruction. And yet we know that the worst images are those that were unseen to the world. The empty seat at the dinner table, children who were forced to grow up without their mother or their father, parents who would never know the feeling of their child's embrace, nearly 3,000 citizens taken from us, leaving a gaping hole in our hearts. On September 11th, 2001, in our time...
All right, if y'all remember, this was right after, I think, either Super Bowl or a big football game. And
it was in May. I want to say it was near like Cinco de Mayo, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't remember that, but I really remember it coming after some big sporting event, like a football game or a Super Bowl. And like trauma bonding extraordinaire, right?
Unreal.
He's great. He is so charismatic, and he just really captures your attention here.
Pulls on all the heartstrings.
Right.
Of course. We would really need to review I guess the Sandy Hook alligator tears or pardon me, crocodile tears. I didn't mean to insult alligators.
Right. Well, because it's almost like you can do a splice back and forth between Trump's announcement of al-Baghdadi and Obama. Like there's a couple passages that are almost identical in the delivery. It's just
so what's it's like
last night the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. The United States has been searching for Baghdadi for many years. Capturing or killing Baghdadi has been the top national security priority of my administration. U.S. Special Operations Forces executed a dangerous and daring nighttime raid in northwestern Syria and accomplished their mission in grand style. The U.S. personnel were incredible. I got to watch much of it. No personnel were lost in the operation, while a large number of Baghdadi's fighters and companions were killed with him.
Now,
America is winning.
Okay, everybody knows if you're into MMA that Trump just went to the Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal event in New York City, and he has had a long storied relationship with the WWF and other.
Not to mention
McMahon,
Dana White,
Dana White,
and him hosting, among the UFC's first events.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly.
Yeah, I mean, he has hosted. He's friends with Mike Tyson. He's hosted all sorts of shows.
He's a New Yorker.
He's a New Yorker.
Yeah.
He's a brazen guy. He is really in this. He's really fit. Playing the role of the commander in chief of the military-industrial complex, and just being the mouthpiece of of NATO. The thing that he, as long as we get the money from the countries, I think he's happy, right? With NATO, he's okay with NATO. Maybe he disagrees with it, but he can't dismantle it.
Right.
The best he can do is ensure, and this is his campaign promise anyways, we get the money from the countries requisite with their contribution in NATO. But at the end of the day, he's still basically playing this game with all the Middle Eastern cutouts and the warmongering. And now, if he came out and said, we brought John McCain to justice with Hillary Clinton for funding those proxy armies, desperate people in the Middle East who we subverted and funded to commit atrocities that further our aristocratic, foreign policy objectives. If he said something like, we're bringing those people to justice. We've got a lot of domestic enemies who are sowing, discontent over there to, appease the Israeli, defense force and their foreign policy object. He's not saying any of that. It's more.
It's all about America. Fuck yeah. We win.
I watched much of it.
In
the Situation Room.
Just like Obama and Hillary did.
Eating a bowl of ice cream with Hershey's chocolate syrup.
And a Diet Coke. He loves Diet Coke.
And a Diet Coke.
And a hamburger.
Yeah. The spray tan.
It's pretty obvious. Around his eyes, he's like, all right, I just gotta remember this script.
Yeah.
You can really see it in the eyes. He's like, gosh, they're really, really dragging me out here and have to cower to this narrative. I mean, because what's that clip where they've identified several other instances where it's the same. It's this guy. There was one in 2015. There was
al-Baghdadi.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, is this like
it's a Mandela effect? Some
common name?
I guess, but it's almost like it was reported on before that they had already nabbed him. It's like he's died again.
No, I have spoken with Marines who have served, and even those who have gone on to I guess, dare I say, extracurricular branches of the military, and
right,
they have told me that they've killed the same guy 10, 11 times.
Right.
That they get their orders, and they get their targets, and they have their objectives, and they execute, and they are.
And when you have a government-run
very
identification database, right, and system of controls, passports,
proxies,
customs, etc., CIA, you know, when Epstein was arrested, right, and they started raiding his properties, they found multiple passports, and his lawyers were like, well, he's a billionaire, that's standard practice for a billionaire. He's traveling internationally. He might be, held up, and he needs to provide some fake identification so he can get away.
Right.
It's like, he's not conducting any criminal activity that, he would possibly be asked to identify himself to answer to.
Yeah.
Right.
It's because some terrorist is trying to steal his wallet, and he needs to give him a fake passport. Yeah, that's why.
Right.
Right. I think this is the clip from True News you were talking about. So
definitely, I want to say there's some
at 2 minutes you mentioned.
Yeah, there's a couple little time code segments there that kind of just set up a little context and they provide a little commentary that I think is useful in determining it. It's got some good stuff.
In Syria despite Baghdadi's.
And after President Trump announced that a U.S. military operation killed Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. We have this report from Reuters.
Despite Baghdadi's death, the security situation in Syria remains complex. Multiple state and non-state actors continue to vie for control of territory and resources within the country. Our mission in Syria today remains the same as it was when we first began operations in 2014, to enable the enduring defeat of ISIS.
United States Special Operations Forces, under the command and control of United States Central Command, General Frank McKenzie, conducted a counterterrorism operation which resulted in the death of the founder and the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. During the mission, U.S. forces were infiltrated by helicopter and, once on the objective, secured the target compound. The assault force was engaged with small arms fire, and the threats were quickly eliminated. Our forces isolated the compound and protected all the non-combatants. While clearing the objective, U.S. forces discovered al-Baghdadi hiding in a tunnel. The assault force closed in on Baghdadi and ended when he detonated a suicide vest.
And what about prisoners? You took some. How many? And whose custody are they in now?
They're in our custody, and they're at a secure facility.
Can you tell us how many?
There were 2 adult males taken off the objective alive, and they're in our custody.
General Milley, President Trump described yesterday Baghdadi whimpering and crying before he died. Can you elaborate or confirm those details?
Secretary was asked the same question yesterday. I know the president had planned to talk down to the unit and unit members, but I don't know what the source of that was there, but I assume it was talking directly to unit and unit members.
So you haven't talked to any unit members who've described that to you?
I have not talked to unit members, no, that's correct. I've talked to the commander, CENTCOM, and others, but not down to the unit members, down at that level of fidelity.
All right, last question.
Well, Edward Zoll is back today following his shoulder surgery last week. And of course, Doc Burkhart is here too. Gentlemen, Edward, glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Got to hand it to you. You shouldered the burden like you've always shouldered the burden. It was
good. Good pun there. All right. All right. Well, our audience was concerned about you, and a lot of people were praying for you. So
really appreciate
glad you came through it very quickly. I don't even know where to start today with this stuff. This is,
when you're opening,
you know, is the old saying, "Deja vu all over again." Let's try to go through it. We'll talk about what they say are the facts. I'm just going to come right out and I mean, I've heard this story before.
Right. Several times before.
Multiple times. Not only this story, but I've seen this. I've seen this movie multiple times since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So for me, it's like, here we go again. They are counting on the American people and the people of the world not having a memory longer than 5 minutes ago, because this stuff went on all throughout the Iraq War when George W. Bush was in the White House. There were people, there were al-Qaeda terrorists that the U.S. killed multiple times, and I used to keep track during the Iraq War. I kind of like had a scoreboard of how many times certain terrorists died, and then they'd come back to life and they'd kill them again the next year, and then they'd be gone for a year, and then they'd be killed again. And the same news stories recycled over and over and over, and the people bought it because the people didn't remember. The public doesn't remember. They just hear, oh, a terrorist was killed today, and you're trying to tell folks, no, they killed that guy last year, right? And you can't convince them of it because they don't remember it.
Right.
And so anyhow, I've seen this movie before. It's getting old. It you know, I don't know if it's made at the Pentagon Hollywood or the CIA Hollywood. Which one? I mean, which movie lot did they make it? I don't know. It's a production from the U.S. government. So let's go through the storyline, and we'll try to act like we believe the storyline. So President Trump came on TV Sunday morning and made this grandiose announcement that the U.S. had killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the so-called leader of ISIS. And but you know, my view is ISIS is the Israel State Intelligence Service. That's the true ISIS.
Sure.
That's the legitimate name of Mossad, Israel State Intelligence Service, ISIS. 20 years ago, it was called ISIS. Okay.
We've shown that particular video clip several
from the
times.
authors
from C-SPAN interview 20 years ago. What's been operating in Syria is a jihadist mercenary army that was recruited, trained, funded, and armed by the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, plus a handful of other Gulf nations. The purpose of it was to destroy Syria, mainly bring down the Syrian government led by Bashar al-Assad, and carve up Syria. Israel wanted a big chunk of it for greater Israel. I think the plan was to create a Kurdistan. It's obvious Israel wants Kurdistan. They want a second state of Israel. There's a historic
bond,
DNA connection between the Ashkenazi Jews and the Kurds. They see them as cousins.
Right.
And they have some commitment to the Kurds. We've got evangelicals here in the United States telling us that the Kurds are the evangelicals of the Muslim world.
Wrap your mind around that.
Yeah.
Not of the Middle East, but of the Muslim world.
Yeah, so it's propaganda on top of propaganda on top of propaganda. And, you know, Pat Robertson weeks ago was warning President Trump that God's going to lift the mandate of heaven off of the Trump administration because he betrayed the Kurds, you know. And then I said somebody else came out and said the Kurds are the evangelicals of the Muslim world. And, you know, Lindsey Graham was, you know, crying because, you know, President Trump was withdrawing 28 soldiers from northern Syria. And I mean, it's just boo-hooing and boo-hooing and boo-hooing over, we're not killing anybody right now. What's wrong with you?
But I just heard Defense Secretary Mark Esper just say in that clip that our operations continue in Syria as they have since 2014.
So, yes, and 2014, Barack Obama was the President of the United States. That's when the United States and that's when the United States became heavily involved. The U.S. was involved covertly in 2011.
Yes, Operation Timber Sycamore was one of the few operations involved the CIA arming and training jihadists in that region.
Yeah. So by 2014, the U.S. was heavily involved, but we kept denying that we had boots on the ground, that we were doing anything.
Sort of just big socks, basically.
Yeah. But we just heard him say that the U.S. has been there since 2014 and continues and will continue. And so what he just said just verified everything that I've said on this program, for the last 5-6 years about the war in Syria, that it's a U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabian war.
Right. And in your opening, you quoted the Reuters article that came out today that said that, yes, President Trump said that we were pulling troops out, but that doesn't mean we're abandoning the fight against ISIS. All right, so where are we fighting ISIS at then? It's still going to be fought in Syria. Right. That's where we're fighting it. We're not moving it to Iraq or Iran or anywhere else. We're going to stay in Syria and fight
not yet, at least.
ISIS.
What the guy with the
So what I loved about this is you sent me the YouTube.
Oh yeah,
you sent me the YouTube in like 24 hours.
It was down.
YouTube scrubbed it.
Yep.
Amazing shit.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, with holograms and ID and it's.
I mean, I like to call it the Zyologopolis technocracy and pedocracy, really.
Yeah, pedocracy is good.
There's this flavor of Zionistic political ideological elements within the oligarchy, but it's using that kind of as a shield to consolidate all the monopolies that they've already ensconced themselves in across the world, and and then they have this sick underbelly culture of depravity and degeneracy that preys on children.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of in your face now.
Wants to hurt them, them, kill them, prevent them.
And distort them and contort them into one of 33 different genders. I mean, it's unreal the level of insanity.
Yeah,
that's befallen what has it's the Overton window thing of it's gone so far towards these extremes that people become anesthetized to it. They're starting to just sort of accept a normalized insanity.
Yeah.
And that as being a kind of defiance of the normal while simultaneously becoming a new normal.
Right.
And that's the whole normalcy bias psychosis, and it just ties in with so many things.
It's self-perpetuating, unfortunately, but I think we did pretty good on our agenda. We only missed health wars and new technology, but we're going to have to wrap up this episode.
Absolutely.
We can cover that on our next episode. Everything from vaccines to fluoride in the water to genetically modified organisms, which is a very broad topic, to solutions as well, new technologies and solutions, new and old technologies that can help.
That's right.
Prevent and assist in the detoxification of your life and environment. I want to encourage everybody listening, watching to support us by subscribing to the podcast. If you go to our website, ztitic.news, which is really simple, ZETETIC.NEWS, ztitic.news. You can see all of our new articles. You can find links to our YouTube. You can subscribe on multiple different platforms. I hear it's pretty simple on the iPhone. I don't have one, but I do have an Android, and it works nice. On Google Podcasts, as long as they allow us to distribute our stuff on those platforms, we will do so. But even if not, we'll make it available somehow. So subscribe while it's still free. At some point, we'll start introducing premium content and things of that sort. Right now, we're just trying to, get our voice out there, get our name out there, start networking with some of the other authors and investigators and research communities out there, like Morguile, like Jeranism, like Flat Earth Debate, like
Red Pill Philosophy,
like Eddie Bravo, et cetera, like InfoWars. I mean, to a certain extent, like True News and No More News.
Right.
All those guys. I mean, we're all sort of in this fight together. I think when I say all, it's a sort of debatable term, but anyways, subscribe to our. To us wherever we happen to be. We're also pretty active on Instagram, and also check out our news tabs. These are our RSS aggregators. We don't write this information. It's just information that we come in contact with. We're always going to be building that out and expanding it. And comment, like. What are some of the other social
share,
media?
repost, recycle,
all of those things.
Screen share, whatever.
Tell your friends, tell your family, hide your kids, hide your wife. They're coming for you. But anyways, it's been good. It's been fun. Thank you guys, Xavier and Orthogonal. Welcome to the program. It was good having you on in your perspective. Look forward to more of this, and stay safe. All right.